Yo.
I assume we're live.
Yes.
Well, welcome to the latest episode of XB2+1. I think this is episode 18. I'm not really sure. Jez does all this stuff, but I'm one of your hosts, Ranathor19, the man with the million. And with me, as always, we have Jez Corden, managing editor, Windows Central. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, pal. Yes, we are rocking and rolling. I'm still setting up the stream. I'm so bad at this stuff. But at least your microphone worked first time this time, because the last time we did this, you were muted, or I was muted, or someone was muted. But yeah, it looks like we're rocking and rolling, and we have an awesome guest with us this week.
Is this the Sweet Baby support group? Did I come to the right place?
Oh,
Yes,
no.
you are in the right place. Yes, this is the Sweet Baby support, Sweet Baby detected group.
I love it. I've only just started becoming aware of all this discourse, and it's
crazy,
scary and weird and all that stuff. But yes, David Jaffe, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome guest show.
Are you guys gonna? I thought you guys were just doing the funny voices when we were doing the pre-show. Are you guys gonna talk like that the whole time? I can do it. Hello, Governor. Where's the Bobby on the shrimp? I know.
Well, that's Australian.
I know. That's why I
Australian.
said.
Yeah.
My actual English accent is like a pirate, a bad dumb pirate.
Oh man,
I love being here. Thank you guys. It's been
Yes.
I've been aware of your show, and Jez, I've been aware of your writing for a while, and so I'm glad to finally be meeting you guys.
I wonder, you and Jez, I'm surprised you haven't had Jez on your show to talk about some things.
I always feel very shy about asking people I don't know to come on, because I don't want to be presumptuous.
Oh no, I'll come on whenever. I mean, we have talked about it back and forth, but it's just sometimes it's so like. It can be difficult to line up schedules, right? Especially when like we're in such divergent time zones in some ways, right?
That's right. That's part of it for sure. And then I think another part of it is just, I think I really feel like I want to bring somebody on when, like, Jez, if you pick up like a sex worker who happens to be like a illegal alien robot from another, when you're in the news, I want to talk. Otherwise, I need to kind of really know the person, so I have some good questions. But I don't know. I think too much. I'm in my head too much. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Kind of Funny Games Daily. I'm your host, Greg Miller, alongside the busiest lady in the business, Jez.
Oh man,
That's pretty good.
Riddling's kicking in, boys. Riddling's kicking in.
Maybe you've got a future in the industry as a voice actor. I mean, you've got Australian.
Everybody
now.
tells me that, but the problem, yeah, right. We need to do the Simple Jack character of Australian people for our Tropic Thunder remake. Get Jaffe, he's great. But yeah, no, it's really funny because I like to do stupid voices and shit, but every time people tell me that, and I know you guys are joking, but people have told me in earnest that, and I'm like, yeah, but acting is its own skill outside of doing funny voices. I'm always blown away by acting, because it's when I meet actors in real life, even if I've just gone to see a play locally, and afterwards, they're out in the lobby hanging out or whatever, or you're talking like famous actors, it's just, my brain can't process it because I so buy into the fact that they're those characters. And then I'm like, how are you this person? Because you were just that person, And I know that sounds dumb. It's like, yeah, Jaffe, it's called acting. I know, but it's a crazy real skill that seems like something anybody could do. But when you really drill down, it's like, that shit's tough, man. Or I don't know if it's hard, but not everybody can do it. I certainly can't.
Well, I couldn't believe it. Like the other day, me and Rand were talking about Indiana Jones, and Rand was like, "Oh, that's Troy Baker," and I was like, "What?" Because it sounds like Harrison Ford. It's like, wow, that dude's like a wizard. But
yeah,
dude, like you should for people like you're a famous guy in the industry, and people know who you are. But for those in the chat who might not, be fully aware of who you are and what you've done in the industry. Do you want to give us a brief overview, a brief intro to yourself in your own words? Is that
sure?
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot.
He doesn't seem very enthused to.
Some people don't. Some people love talking about themselves. Some people don't. I'm getting the.
I love talking about things. Just because Okay. Let me turn this off. Okay. So hi, my name is Speed Dating. My name is David Jaffe. I started making or working in video games in 1992 as a tester on the brilliant game Cliffhanger and Last Action Hero from Sony ImageSoft. I did actually play. Some of their games were great, including Hook and Skyblazer. Anyway, point being, I started like that. I moved into eventually game design, game direction. I'm best known for being the co-creator and co-director of the Twisted Metal series, and then the director, lead writer, lead designer of the very first God of War, creative director of the second God of War. And then, I've done some other things that weren't anywhere near successful, Calling All Cars, Drawn to Death, some creative directing work at various studios, and I had a couple of studios that I co-ran with various people until Drawn to Death came out about 5 years ago. Total failure, flame out, and I said I don't want to do that anymore. Not because it was a failure, just because I was done. And the last 4 or 5 years or so, I've been really focused on streaming. I do a live show 4 to 5 times a week. 4 of the times is a video game centric show, lots of call-ins. It's not me and somebody else talking. It's me and the audience talking about the news of the day and the debates of the day, game design, blah, blah, blah. And then on Saturdays, we do a show called I Love the Weird, which is a call-in show about aliens and UFOs and monsters and paranormal shit and all kinds of good stuff like that. So
that's well up my
and
street.
I've been doing that for about 4 or 5 years. Yeah, I love it. I get asked a lot about, Jaffe, do you want to go back and make games? I have 1 or 2 games still in the closet that I'm just like, if the opportunity presents itself, and it's got to be a very specific opportunity, I would like to drag those out and say, let's make these. But I don't covet that role or job anymore. I'm loving doing, I guess what's called content creation, which is the word content I have a weird relationship with, but you know what I'm saying? The YouTubes and the streams and the videos and whatnot.
Well, what made
that's me, fellas. Hey, everybody.
What made you decide to do YouTube in the first place? Because everybody always I did it on a whim.
I did it because I'll tell you. So I started blogging back when we were developing the first God of War. So my first blog post probably went up around 2003, and I was inspired by the actor from Star Trek and I guess other things now like Tabletop and Big Bang Theory, Will Wheaton. And, he was one of the first kind of geek bloggers. And I was just like, this is kind of cool, and I started doing it and I really enjoyed it. And I built a small little community with that. And so I was doing that before God of War 1 came out. And I just dug it. I enjoyed that immediacy and that connection with sort of the community, the instant connection. And so I think it just naturally evolved into that because I had been doing, interviews for press for years and years after that. So I was very comfortable talking about games on camera anyway. And I think it was probably just some sort of natural extension of it. And really where it ended up now, why I think I love it so much is the games industry has shifted and becomes, certainly there's indie and AA, but if you're talking about sort of the industry I came up in, which was primarily first party Sony, the industry shifted so dramatically towards massive budgets and massive cooks in the kitchen and so many people and so much politicking just to get your vision out there that the world of game creation that I came up in, at least at a first party AAA level, doesn't exist, because what I get when I stream or do podcasts or create shows is that same kind of freedom to just play that I got when I was working for Sony in those first 15 years, where it was like, it wasn't as simple as, hey boss, I have an idea, okay, here's money, go make it. But there were many times it was almost that simple. And sometimes they worked and sometimes they didn't, but that was just for a creative guy like me and a ADD guy like me, literally. I literally just took my Concerta. I'm not like a ADD. I literally bad case of ADD. That was joy to me, and to have that be able to be replicated doing this content stuff is that's probably why I've really transitioned to it and taken to it. but yeah, it was definitely not something that was on my bingo card, but I'm glad it came up.
Yeah, there was the same thing for me. I was just, someone in the community, and then a buddy of mine was just like, "Hey, you should do YouTube," and I was like, "YouTube? What do I have to offer?" Like, who
That's
wants to
for
hear my
old
opinion?
ladies and people
Yeah.
questioning their sexuality.
I'm like, YouTube, and then it's like, oh, even our podcast with Jez, Xbox 2, that literally was, we used to talk in Skype. We used to just be like, hey, we were talk about the latest, things that were going on in the industry, and I think one of us was like, let's just start a podcast on YouTube, because at the time YouTube had still had Google Meets, so you could do the podcast within YouTube's things. So we just started doing the podcast, and we had no aspirations. We didn't know, we'd be doing this 7 years later, or any of the stuff, or have a partnership with Manscaped, which it's kind of funny.
Oh,
see that, John. I'm looking down there.
Yeah.
But that's the weird thing about content creation and the game industry. I feel like in general, you never know where it's all gonna go. And you're talking about how the industry is completely different now to what it used to be when you were back at Sony and stuff like that. What are some of the off the top of your head, what do you mean by the fact that it's so different? What is so different about the industry now beyond the obvious? I mean, is it just the way service games have just come to dominate everything?
Sweet
now?
Baby's involved now, as Jeff.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I was taking the piss, as they say in.
Yes, and I'm taking the piss too. So
yeah, Australia. I know, but no, I mean, yeah, obviously the kinds of games, right? But I think what I'm referring to is just the freedom. Twisted Metal 1, which was not my first game. The first game I officially got to be a designer on was called Mickey Mania, but Twisted Metal 1 was the one most people know from PS1 launch window. Although it was not a big hit, speaking of other countries, it was a big hit in America, but the English folks, I'm not joking. I mean, it was like they wanted nothing to do with it. They were like, this is the stupidest fucking thing. And we could not get any traction there. But anyway, that was a game that cost $850,000. And now games at Sony first party are $300 million. And it's not so much, oh no, I'm nervous spending all that money. It's that if you have $850,000, the number of people that you have to blow in order to get you to have your vision is manageable, for my brain. And I'm not saying that Neil Druckmann or Cory Barlog or whoever's directing Ghost of Tsushima 2 or whatever, I'm not saying that those guys, are better at blowjobs, metaphorically. But I mean, I'm not even making a joke. I mean, whatever because I'm not saying that 99% of Cory's day is dealing with politics, but when you're dealing with that kind of money, there's a lot more challenges to make sure that you as a director or lead writer or lead designer or whatever are still feeling satisfied with the work, because the compromises that have to come from all the people that have to be comfortable every new step you take, is a $12 million step. And that just, for me, wasn't fun. And that's a big way that it's different, right? And you've got so many more people, and so there's a scope issue, there's a politics issue that just, scaled dramatically. Back when I was doing it, it was like maybe 1.5 people I had to keep happy, and the rest was fine. So that's a big part of it. But you're right. When you bring up the types of games, I could have stayed in AA or indie, which is kind of what Drawn to Death was, and even Calling All Cars with Eat, Sleep, Play, which was another company I co-owned. But the problem is, there was also a sense that I had really sort of fallen out of favor with what the core gamers wanted. And now core gamers, I don't even know what that means anymore, because, core gamers, are they the ones that watch the Xbox showcase and the state of play on PlayStation, or are core gamers, the Gen Zers that don't really seem to care much about consoles or owning games, and they want to play Fortnite and Roblox and They're spending as much time playing, I forget what the first person shooter is that's really big on Discord.
Valorant.
It's not called Gronk. No. That's like a real, there's like, if you go to the activities on Discord, there's like it was on the just the browsers before it came to Discord, but it's just like
really?
low budget. Yeah. You know how there's activities you can do with your chat on Discord.
See, I'm so out of touch. I don't even know about that.
Oh yeah. So I mean, it's a dumb little, but it's a lot of it's the social aspect. The point is though, I don't even know what the core gamer is anymore. But if you talk about what we usually associate on shows like these as core gamer, to me, I was reading. I'm trying to think what actor this was. I was looking at last night. It was. Oh, I know who it was. It was. There were news stories about Kevin Costner's new movie, and it's really expensive, and he's put up his own money, and it looks like it may not hit. Blah blah blah. But in that story, they listed kind of his most successful films, and they were all in this window between like 1990, which was Dances with Wolves, up to like, a few years after a movie he made called The Bodyguard. Now, if, a lot of people are like, who the fuck is Kevin Costner? But the point is that you could look at that and go, and that's what I've come to realize in the last couple of years is that, you can look at that and go, that's a window where that particular human was really tapped into the zeitgeist of the audience. And I think there was a period where I look at my body of work from like, 1994 up to maybe 2006. And, almost everything was a hit and people got it and people liked what I was selling. And it was very, very clear when that sort of started to turn. So a bigger part of it too is when you say what's different for me personally is just, the stuff I started to like and started to want to make, and the stuff that I played was just not what was in favor and in fashion. And so at that point, it became a question of, do you want to kind of chase that? And I saw people doing that, and I still see people doing that, and I get it. People, value different things. But for me, as a primarily creative guy, my whole life, the idea of like, let me pretend to care about what, quote, the cool kids in gaming are caring about. And I certainly can't create that way. And I certainly don't want to live that way, but that's me. There's a lot of people who are like, that's cool, Jaffe. I'm over here, in my fucking mansion now because I chose to sort of, eat the shit sandwich of that. And I get it and I applaud it, because, it works for some people, but I'm a little too much of a, color outside the lines guy that I couldn't compromise. And there are pros and cons to that.
Do you think AAA publishers are struggling with that in general? I often like I don't know if you saw the Dragon Age trailer, for example.
Well, there were two of them, right? The gameplay, and then there's the trailer. The trailer was abysmal. The trailer was insanely But whoever was counseling those people to put that trailer out is out of their goddamn minds.
Well, this is just it. I was thinking, like, who is this trailer for? Is this trailer? Are they trying to court the Fortnite Gen Z audience with this trailer? Because it's not working for me. Like, I kind of wonder, like,
it's working for them. I have two kids. Yeah. Trust me, they don't give a shit about that. They're not,
Yeah, exactly. But I just kind of wonder, like, are publishers, like, do you think publishers might be falling over themselves trying to figure out how to appeal to the so-called core gamer, whatever that is now, and while also trying to figure out how to appeal to Gen Z? Because some of these, like, younger gamers and like, I don't know, people call them black hole gamers, they seem to have like a completely different mentality or towards games in general, which kind of feeds into what you were saying about lining up with what's fashionable, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that, I do this show and I talk to the audience. That's my co-host or the audience basically on my shows. Every now and then I'll bring somebody on, but so I get the fire hose of, Jaffe, you're a fucking idiot all the time when I say things like, ownership of video games is an archaic idea and it will be totally the realm of people collecting vinyl today in the next 5 to 10 years, if it's not already almost there for certain generations. And they just come at me and go, you're a fucking moron. And I'm like, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the industry and today's kids, my kids don't own Fortnite. It would never occur to them to say, where's my box copy of Roblox or where's my box copy of Among Us, or Fall Guys or whatever, even like Jackbox Party Game. I'm sure, even though I know you can still buy those on Steam, they just announced the other day that, and that's something a lot of people play, but certainly Gen Z was playing it and Alpha playing it over the pandemic. And they just announced the other day that, you know, they're going to allow you to sort of launch any of the games. It's no longer going to be like Jackbox Party 1, Jackbox 2. They might identify them as that, but it's going to be more like the Call of Duty launcher, where it's like, yeah, you load Call of Duty, and then do you want Warzone? Do you want Modern Warfare 3? You want Black Ops 6? You know, so the point is, to a lot of them, it's not on their radar to own this shit. Or to not subscribe versus, you know, own a digital copy. So I guess the point is, though, is when you say, is AAA struggling with it, I think, you know, I was on Colin's show yesterday, Colin Moriarty, and we were talking about this. And I think what's really fascinating to me is that okay, so the essence of the medium will always be the best North Star to follow if your goal is to make good stuff that people love. It doesn't mean you'll always be the biggest hit commercially, but you'll make enough money usually. Because if you look at any other medium, if it's a good story, the movie will work. If it's a good movie, even if it doesn't have the best production value, the movie will work. If it's a good song, it'll work. If it's a good TV show, you know, production value is important, but if you follow the essence of what your medium does the best and why it exists to begin with, things tend to work out better than not. And I think so much of the industry outside of like Nintendo has really glommed onto what has been so successful for so long for Sony, which is production value. It doesn't, I mean, Sony makes great games. I'm not knocking their games, but a big part of the appeal that gets people in the door is the, you know, bleeding edge graphics and the amazing sound and the motion capture, you know, all of the sort of stuff that sits on top of the nugget or the foundation that is gameplay. And as that stuff really, you know, not only becomes cost prohibitive to continue to increase the production value, but, you know, there comes a point where I think if that's the main thing you're building your house on, you don't really have control when the grounds are going to shift. But I think if you stay focused on the essence of the medium, which is just good gameplay, whether you're talking single player, multiplayer, whatever, you know, and you budget accordingly, you tend, as long as the ideas are commercial enough, you tend to do all right. So I guess it's a long answer, and I'm sorry to ramble, but when you talk about AAA, I think I was saying this yesterday to Colin. It's like, if I was in AAA, I would be going, I think we need a come to Jesus moment. I think we really need to recognize that we've gone down this road and there's a lot of gamers that love it, and we don't want to walk away from production value and all that. I'm not saying throw out the baby in the bathwater, but I think we need to really get centered about what it is we provide to our customers and our audience that they love, that because that's going to see us through. And I think when you start looking at these budgets that are getting to 300 and over in some cases, I mean, you're never, you know, you're right into Hollywood where you can't please almost anybody because you've got to be so generic and basic that everybody isn't offended and everybody shows up. And it's so rare when that works. I mean, it can't work, but it's rare. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think if you're in AAA, you're doing a lot of soul searching right now, and you should be.
Yeah,
I like that. A lot of soul searching.
A lot of soul searching.
Yeah, you know, I know these black hole games that Jez talks about, like the Fortnites of the world and stuff. Always
little racist, by the way, little bit racist.
You think so?
Why what?
The term. I'm kidding.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, okay, I wasn't too sure, but
no, I'm kidding.
I always kind of like, they hold up the industry because they make so much money, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, I also sort of feel like they're ruining the industry in a way.
Why?
Because everybody was chasing after. They want to have their own Fortnite, or they want to have
that's every
their
industry.
own Warzone. I know, and the video game industry is very much a copycat industry.
Yeah, I mean, when I remember being, my very first CES was the last CES for games before the first E3. And you couldn't take two steps in the video game section without seeing run and jump mascots that were trying to be Sonic and Mario. I mean, that's what a lot of people do. They just copy what worked and hope they get lucky.
Yeah, and it's just like, I'm not really a multiplayer guy, even though there are games I've put tons of hours into, like 900 hours into PUBG and God, I couldn't even tell you how many hours I played Halo 2 or Halo 3 at, right? But because of, and I've talked about this with Jez before, like the big thing for me is because these games always continue to exist, I never can find a point to get into them. Like once I fall off of something, I never get back into it, at least with my friend group. Like we were really into Rainbow Six Siege back in 2015 and 2016, and we played that for 200, 300, 400 hours. And then all of us fell off of it, and we've never gone back to Rainbow Six. And we sort of missed the days where you could expect okay, here's Rainbow Six Siege 2, and here's Rainbow Six Siege 3, and all those sort of things. And now it seems to be there's less multiplayer games in general because nobody wants to take on all of these huge games out there. And the new ones that do show up, like Concord, for example, people are already, very dismissive of it because they're like, oh, well, look at the art style. Oh, it's just another hero shooter. Good luck trying to break out when you're competing with all these other things. So it makes, I don't know, I feel like those big games, while they hold up the industry and make a lot of money, I also feel like they are sort of ruining it in a way because these kids growing up, they don't care about, well, I guess it's because they don't care about the things we care about, right? Or that you cared about, or what
well,
Jez
that's
cared
not
about.
ruining it. That's called
I know,
change
but it's
and progress.
right.
And life.
But it's just one of those things where I look at it like maybe it's just the Simpsons meme of old man yelling at clouds because they like the things that I don't like anymore, and I want something different.
I think what you're trying to say is like, I mean, I thought about this too, and it's this idea that the kids growing up with Fortnite, and this is just my perspective, I don't know if you guys agree, but the kids growing up with Fortnite, they don't really see themselves as gamers in the same way that we do. They just see themselves as Fortnite players, or like that's
right.
like it's their sport, and
or it's just what they do after school. I mean, it's just their social. And it's the mall they hang out in that I used to have. Exactly, we had malls.
Exactly, and it's sort of like for people of our generation, we're more like variety gamers where we get bored of a game and move on. Like I can't imagine playing Fortnite over and over again for like years and years and years. I say that as someone who's played World of Warcraft for 20 years, but I play that on the side, right? I want my variety as well. I want my cake and I have to eat it. But like the game industry seems to have been redefined by this concept of, the game as a hobby, I suppose. Where it's like we're kind of like we want variety, and like Xbox delivered like a ton of variety at their showcase, but now like I'm sitting there just thinking like, are Gen Z gonna play any of these games? Is it all up to us? Have we got to make sure that we play all these games, or is it doomed?
Well, okay, so first off, I think that's sort of one of the problems with a lot of your generation. I mean, you're younger than me, so when I say your generation, people who were kids, I assume when PS1 was ruling the roost, right? Or PS2, somewhere in that era.
I was going into high school when PS1 came out. 95. I would have been a freshman in high school. So
okay, so there's a generation of people, or a couple of generations of people that came up with on the front or the tail end of PlayStation's contribution to what gaming is. And so a big part of that, and Xbox jumped on board with a lot of it. They innovated in a lot of ways too, but in terms of sort of what a mainstream AAA game is, a lot of it is about the production value, the story, the characters, blah, blah, blah. And I absolutely would agree with you that, if that's what you're used to and that's what you want to see continue, that is, still there. And I think we are in a very rich time, in a wonderful, probably the best time for video games ever. But as I say often, you have to play up and down the budgetary spectrum. I think the people that are probably feeling what you're describing the most are the ones that are primarily console gamers, primarily maybe only play on one console. And even when they play on one or two consoles, they rarely move past the top 5 to 10 games on the digital store. But there are, all you have to do is look at Steam Next Fest, which just is wrapping up today or last night. And there are tons of single player narrative based games that are really interesting and neat mechanics and neat ideas. But there is a big part of the audience that, you know, the production value era has grown and created that just won't even look at those games because I'm not playing that fucking indie game. It's all pixely or the graphics are shit. And it's like, okay, that's fine.
Sounds like
but
Ran.
those are the people. Well, those are the people,
no.
and that's fine. That's fine. But those are the people, though, that are going to get being served less and less and less because it costs too much, and there's just not enough people to justify that cost anymore.
I mean, Sony really lives in that world of high production values and expensive stuff. So, are they potentially the ones who are going to be caught out the most by this? Like, we see them playing catch-up with service games and stuff like right now.
You cannot say it out loud to most people because they just, you know, it's so tribal. It's so embarrassing for them, but whatever. But it's like, you know, I don't mind being a hardcore defensive fanboy, but I would have assumed by this point we would all be hardcore defensive fanboys for the medium of games and not for the individual consoles. It's like, to me, that's the equivalent of like, I'm not going to see that movie because it's playing at a theater that uses this projector. And I'm like, dude, it's the movie. What the fuck do you care what it's playing on, you know? But whatever.
Analogy.
But people do, and that's them, and blah blah blah. So, but yes, I would say if you're Sony right now, it's really tough because you can't deny the massive success they're having right now, but you also can't deny that the industry is just fragmented and continuing to fragment, and it's changing, and it's generational shift and technological shifts and what the expectations of the younger generation are compared to the generation they built their bones with. And they, of all the first party companies, I think, they, you know, Sean Layden was the guy that rang the bell first, you know, 10 years ago saying the core audience isn't growing. The pie is getting split differently, but the core number of people lives around 250 to 300 million. So your budgets are going up, but your audience isn't growing no matter who's number one at any given time. And in that, something's going to have to give, whether that's the design philosophy to make games more, you know, welcoming to a bigger audience, or whether it's the production value dropping or whatever. So if you do play on everything from the latest $300 million magnum opus from Naughty Dog, or you play itch.io, which are like one-man band games on PC, which are really interesting and fresh and chance-taking, you're very happy. I'm very happy as a gamer right now. But if you only are playing in the places that a lot of these gamers that come on shows like this play, then I would say you're like, what the fuck is going on? But one more thing I want to say on Fortnite though, and all that, you know, Fortnite, if you haven't played Fortnite since it was like, you know, the flavor of the month, you're really missing out because Fortnite is staggeringly good. I understand the art style, and I don't like to build shit. The most popular mode on Fortnite is called no build mode. Mm-hmm. So it's just third person shooting. But it's as good as Warzone. I mean, you've got really cool vehicles. You've got every month or 6 weeks, there's really cool additions to the season with new mechanics and new weapons and lots of new little metagame things. It's genuinely fun. And then on top of it, you've got all of the stuff that people are creating in Unreal Engine 5 Fortnite creator, which has, you know, given people the ability to make games for, you know, 100 million audience big if they hit. And so I think a lot of people who shit on Fortnite, I get the knee jerk because it looks so kiddie and everybody thinks Ninja's an idiot and blah blah blah. Back when he was doing the Fortnite stuff, I totally get the vibe of that. But if you really love games and you haven't visited Fortnite in a while, I recommend it. But I don't think they're ruining games. I think the games industry, like any other industry, has always just gone where the audience is. And you know, Concord, I think is weird. Like, I thought Helldivers 2 was not going to work because they were charging $40 for it. And even though I liked it, it's not my kind of game, but I was like, holy shit, that's amazing that they could charge $40 and it could still work. And why that happened and how much of it was the pedigree of Helldivers 1, I don't fucking know. And it's also a great game. Concord might be the same or it might be a little different. The biggest problem with Concord is, and I think it looks mechanically really interesting. I'm not like shitting on it, but Marvel Rivals is coming out that roughly the same time, and that's free to play. And it's got the brand, and it's on everything, and it's crossplay. And so and I don't think Marvel Rivals looks that great, but people who played it last week at the Summer Games Fest said it is a very good, what's the Valve thing? Not the Valve thing, the Blizzard.
Overwatch.
It's a very good Overwatch 2 clone. So I don't think it looks that way when I watch people streaming the beta. But people who are playing the recent builds are saying, no, if you like Overwatch 2, this is that, but it's with Marvel skins and Marvel abilities, blah, blah, blah. I think Concord at $40 has a really, tough road to hoe. But the the point being, though, is that I think that, I don't know. You were talking about sort of the black hole of these games and stuff. And I think if people show up for it and they like it, I don't know.
Well, it's just because I just remember during the 360 generation, you'd get so many of these games. You'd even get like as we would call them, like the B tier games, which are copies of the triple. Like it was a copy of something else, but they were. Yeah. See, to me, the 360 gen is the best generation there ever was. Maybe that's just because that's when I played most of my games. But when I think of like, if someone asks me like, hey, what is your favorite generation? It's clear it's the 360 PS3 generation without a shadow of doubt. Because you got, and honestly, I don't really even think gaming has really moved on much from that generation. Like all the big AAA franchises basically are just updated versions of the ones we got during the 360 gen. We just also happen to get games faster instead of waiting 5 years in between games now like we have to. We got a new one every other year.
If you look back at, we did this on my show because I was lamenting the same thing because I was a designer for Sony in the PS1 era, so I was on the front line seeing all just this every generation that advances gets slower to get your games, right? So if you look on Wikipedia and you look at if you look at PS1 first party game releases, we counted it and it was like well over 150 per year, like 150 games. And now if you jump to PS5 era, you're lucky to get 4 to 5. And if you're getting 4 to 5, at least 2 of those are second party or they're exclusives that are timed exclusives. They're not actually a first party game. So yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the reasons that Xbox Showcase works so well as a showcase, we'll see what the games are, but was that it felt a lot like that. It felt like, holy shit, new game, new idea, new game, updated, it felt like we were getting into that cadence. And what I'll say is that cadence does still exist, but you're going to get it in AA and in indie games right now, which if you love games and you don't care about production value as the main thing, nothing's changed. You can't there's literally a website you can go on that updates like every 5 minutes, new games on Steam. And at the end of the day, there's like 100 new games a day. Now, a lot of them are shit, but a lot of the PS1 era games were shit too. But I'm just saying that experience you're describing on the 360 is still out there, but it's not out there in the AAA space. But and I ramble a lot, so please interrupt. If I know I haven't been on your show before, but I'll just go and just interrupt me.
Oh, we ramble too. Don't worry.
Okay, I just get excited. But and I know the audience is like, dude, Jaffe, shut up. I know. I'm sorry, fellas. But
no.
What I was going to say, though,
we're a ramble friendly show here.
Oh, good. What I was going to say though is the Xbox show, right? So I watched the Ubisoft Forward the next day after Xbox, and I tweeted out, I was like, you know what, if Sony wants to compete, I would really consider, I don't know if there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but I was saying I would consider opening up the checkbook and buying Ubisoft. And people just, you're a fucking idiot, Sony doesn't need to compete, they're already competing, they're number one, blah blah. And I'm like, guys, that's not what I'm saying. Somebody sent me a Xbox, I know you guys have seen it, but the Xbox roadmap with all of the games up until 2026. And we see that all the time, but this one now is like a lot of those things that in the past were like speculative have now been filled in either with concrete launch dates or concrete launch windows or a year. And we've actually seen footage, right? And it's like, okay, these games are now coming. And if you look at the scope of what Xbox is doing, and this is something people, it's nothing clever to say, that Xbox, when they acquired Activision, a big part of it was that they want to step into the world of, at least an entertainment company, of the Apples and the Tencents and the Amazons. Like, they have gone to the next level, to the highest level of companies that are producing and distributing entertainment now. And Sony right now, I was just like, it's not that their games aren't better historically. I don't, even though I thought like South of Midnight visually looked amazing, I thought We Happy Few visually looked amazing. I don't have a lot of faith that that game's going to be great, but what they showed looks great. But chances are what Sony puts out is going to be a lot better. The problem though is Sony can't compete with the scope anymore and with the scale anymore. And so when you have a show like the Xbox show that, you know, if they can actually release those games at the clip they're promising, and if those games are good enough to brilliant, and I'm sure most of them will fall into that. A lot of them won't, but who knows with Matt Booty and Phil's history, they haven't really earned a lot of faith that they can pull this off. But if they can, good luck to Sony, because as great as Sony's games are, you know, a couple of actual first party games a year that merit buying that piece of hardware. That's all I was saying. I wasn't knocking Sony's games at all. I was just saying they need more. Because if Xbox can pull this off, they're going to get left in the dust just in terms of, you know, release cadence.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Rand.
Well, yeah, no. So the Xbox showcase, I think for a lot of people, maybe it was that nostalgia that seems the Xbox because Jez always says PlayStation and Nintendo rely on nostalgia for a lot of things, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
Where Xbox really doesn't delve too much into that.
Well, it's more
hard
it's
to
more
be nostalgic over Blinks the Time Capsule.
Yeah, that's
true.
That was my point. Is that Xbox just doesn't have a well of nostalgia to dig into.
But now, when you think about Gears E-Day, and you realize when that game most likely is coming out in 2026, you're talking about the 20th anniversary of Gears.
Oh yeah, Gears looks great. Like,
right?
Gears doesn't look great. Gears is a fucking trailer that's got nothing, you know. But the trailer looks great, and I love the idea of what Gears E-Day is going to be based on what they said. Yeah, it looks great.
But it's the nostalgia factor because everybody looks very fondly back on the 360 generation. For a lot of people, that was when they first started gaming.
Yeah.
So they see Marcus and Dom, and they're like, "Holy shit!" You know, they don't really care about the new storylines, right? They see Call of Duty Black Ops 6. And, you know, they see Fable,
Indiana Jones is no different. Indiana Jones is a dead franchise for most people under the age of 35. If you didn't come up with Indy in the first 3, you don't give a fuck about Indiana Jones. And I know that because just look at the box office of the last movie. You know, nobody showed up even the first week to see that movie. And I'm one of the biggest Indiana Jones fans you're going to find. Like, I'm a bigger Indy fan than Todd Howard, probably. That's how I fucking am in. Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. Stop, you dumb fuck.
Doesn't sound as good as Jez's Alexa.
No, it doesn't. Jez's is all like, hello, governor, it's time for tea. Would you like to know how Kate's doing today? But you know, I wouldn't be in any creative industry if it wasn't for Sing Raiders Lost Ark. But I recognize that, you know, I watched that trailer for Indy, and I love Machine Games. I don't love all their games; they haven't made that many. But like Wolf Blood, okay, whatever. But the mainline Wolfensteins are great. The Starbreeze stuff, a lot of those guys worked on are great. I have no doubt this is going to be a really, really good game at worst. But I think to deny that a big part of why that trailer landed, most of which was cutscene, was you got to be an Indiana Jones fan. Otherwise, if you've never heard of Indiana Jones, the trailer should still wow you, and it's just melee punching and a guy with a whip. Like, it's nothing special about what they showed, and that's not to knock it. It's one of my most anticipated games of this year. But I think, to your point about nostalgia, there were a lot of reasons that was such a great showcase that I think it's fair to be excited, and it's fair to be positive and hopeful if you're a fan of this ecosystem of games from Microsoft. But I think, you know, as I've said recently on a number of shows, I was excited for Redfall after Pete Hines went on stage for the deep dive the week after the last big Xbox show. And I was like, dude, this sounds great. And he was saying all the right things. And this was not 2 years out. This was 3 or 4 months before the game was ready. So it was in beta. They were testing it. They were trying to get it out the door. He knew what that fucking game was, and he still went out there and tried to fucking sell it. And so I'll believe it when I see it. Xbox has not earned my confidence in the way that Sony has, and that I may not like the next Naughty Dog game, but I know it'll be really well made.
You know, I actually have a question from a Patreon member that kind of dovetails into this scenario. He goes, this is from Joaquin. He goes, "Hello, Mr. Jaffe. Let me start by saying I love Twisted Metal Black and is one of my favorite games of all time. On your most recent video about the Xbox Showcase, you said something that I was hoping you could clarify. You mentioned that Xbox could be in better position, quote, if they can deliver, but you have your doubts because, as you put it, quote, Xbox games are typically terrible, end quote. Humor me for a second, but if we look at just this generation alone, Xbox has delivered a 92 Metacritic Forza Horizon, 89 Metacritic Psychonauts 2, 87 Metacritic Halo Infinite, 88 Metacritic Deathloop, 83 Starfield, 81 Hellblade, Hellblade 2, 83 Grounded, 89 Hi-Fi Rush, so on and so forth. So my question is, why is Xbox painted with the Redfall brush? And what exactly do you mean when you say, quote, Xbox games are typically terrible? Thanks for all you do and happy Pride Month.
Thank you very much for all of that. And thanks for playing our games and liking them. I appreciate that. So fuck off. No, I'm kidding.
Screw you, Joaquin.
Yeah, Joaquin, go back to making fucking movies like Gladiator, you shithead. No, so me saying they were terrible was, I'd like to think that was obvious hyperbole, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know what quote he's talking about, but it doesn't not sound like me. But let me be clear though. I've also been very vocal about saying Starfield is definitely one of my favorite games the last 5 years. Starfield is the best single player narrative story I've ever experienced in gaming. I did not think that the DLC they showed looked great, but I'm there day one. I was there night one when they dropped the recent update. I love Forza Horizon. So he's right. There are games that are good, but I think again, if I said terrible and it was that literal, that's my bad. I don't think they make terrible games on the whole. I think their games though lack the ones that come out that actually work. And I would say that there are a number of games that are just like, what the fuck are you guys doing? But if you take like Psychonauts 2, I thought Psychonauts 2 was a great story. It was really funny, really well written, not a very good game. Especially compared to like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which came out around the same time. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is one of the best, I get that it's not the world's most innovative game, but as an execution piece, it is probably the best 3D platform game ever made in terms, and I'm not saying they created all the stuff, but just to say, we're going to take all the stuff that works in this genre and we are going to spit polish it like a motherfucker, and it is going to be fast and look great and play great and be fun. Psychonauts 2 did not play very well. I thought it was quite dull, personally. I think if you look at Hellblade 2, which I enjoyed what I played about 2 hours and then I haven't gone back to it. It's fine. There's some cool graphics in it, but it's just, I think if you are coming with those kinds of games and you have the experience with Sony's take on those kinds of games, Sony would not let those things out of the kitchen. They're still in the oven, and Xbox will ship them. And that's fundamentally what I mean. Everything from how often they delay, to how average a lot of their games. Average is probably a much better word than terrible, and I apologize if I made it seem like they were all just crap. I don't feel that, but I do feel that their games are kind of average. I thought Deathloop was pretty average. Was kind of boring after a while. It didn't really do much. Is neat, but I'm trying to think of all the other games this guy mentioned. What else did he say?
He mentioned obviously Forza Horizon, Psychonauts 2, Halo Infinite.
Halo Infinite I loved. I rarely finish games. I finished the campaign of Halo Infinite, and I love the multiplayer. It's a great multiplayer game. So I got no issues with that one. What else are you saying?
Starfield, Hellblade, Grounded.
Grounded, I thought same thing. I think Grounded was like, I know a lot of people love it. I thought it was kind of cool for a day or two, and then I moved on.
Hi-Fi Rush.
Hi-Fi Rush, same thing. It's none of these land in the zeitgeist like the Sony games. None of these. I just want to be clear. My biggest beef with Microsoft games or Xbox games, whatever they're calling it these days, is the fact that they don't deliver often enough, and they aren't dependable, and when they do deliver, it seems 50-50 that it's actually going to be something that you're going to love. But that doesn't mean that there aren't games they've put out that I haven't loved, because that would not be true.
That's kind of an encapsulation of last year, right? What you just said about Xbox was sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't. Like last year, for example, Hi-Fi Rush. I know it wasn't like everybody in the world played it, but it was super critically acclaimed. It was very
it was
unique,
really good. Really
right?
fun game. Really
great
fun
game out of nowhere. But then Minecraft Legends came out, and nobody cared about that game after a week, right? Redfall came out and was a tragedy.
Yep.
Starfield came out, and you loved it, and I'm sure you took a lot of shit for it.
I did, but I love it. But a lot of people were disappointed in it. That's clear.
Oh yeah, I mean, it didn't achieve the critical success of Skyrim. I loved it as well. I think me and you are in line about like the story and stuff. And I'm not a Bethesda person, like Bethesda Game Studios person. Like my last game was Skyrim, and I don't play those type of games like how everybody else does. So I love Starfield, and then Forza Motorsport came out, and that kind of was like, okay, everybody forgot about it a week later. So you have some good games in there, but then you also have some misses. And
yes, and if you couple that with their seemingly inability to ship and manage on time, those two things together just create this kind of poison, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, it's the up and down stuff. I think like they're gonna have their great games like Forza and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, the hope is that everything's firing now. They have the domino set up, because that's what the showcase kind of was for me. Was all right, we're at this position now where we're firing all cylinders. Everything is lined up. Here's the roadmap. Here's the games for this year. Here's some of the games for next year. Here's some of the games for 2026.
Yeah.
To see what they look like. Okay, dominoes start to fall, right?
Hope so.
Yeah, well, that's like cross fingers hope that it all, like they all come in. They all need to be great games. That's the thing I've always said is Xbox's problem is they'll have a really good game, and then their next one will just be like, ugh. And then people get down on Xbox, and then the next one after that might be okay, but the next one after that might be like, oh, this is really good. Like they had something going in 2021. Like they nailed off Forza and Halo and Psychonauts and Flight Sim, and they were Metacritic Publisher of the Year. And people were like, this is the new Xbox. Like this is what we can expect moving forward. I'm just saying that's what
I know, but even the thing the other thing again, I'm a Xbox fan. I have said, not that it matters what's on the record, but on the record, I have said that between all of the systems I have, these days, most of what I play is GeForce Now and Game Pass on my PC. But the most interesting, exciting console this generation has been Xbox Series X for me. Obviously, it hasn't been the most successful by a long shot, but the stuff they're trying and the stuff they're doing, and it's fresh, it's different, it's interesting. I'm a big fucking fan, so I'm not knocking it, but you have to be able to see, or I like to be able to see both aspects of things. And one of the aspects I think that is negative with Xbox has always been their inability to really greenlight games that burrow into sort of the zeitgeist and really become beloved franchises. Like
let me ask you something. Let me ask you something. As someone who's been like, you've been on the inside of Sony's sort of pipeline and their way of doing things. What is it? Do you like? I mean, I know it's different times now and all that kind of stuff, but what is it you think that Xbox does differently that precludes them from that? What is it that Sony does that Xbox doesn't do? From a structural perspective, because it can't just be about, or is it about raw talent? Like, does Sony just have better employees, or do they have a better system?
It's the same thing though, because the systems come from the talent, right? Sony is great, not just at their individual hires of designers, programmers, whatever, but they're also great at creative management and knowing how to actually produce these games and knowing, like, there was a big thing, like when I was tail end of the industry, there was a big thing that the reputation for Microsoft first party was they micromanage. And I guess you saw that like with Xbox One, it was just like, leave the fucking developers alone, let them fucking do what they do. And then, you know, how much is lip service and how much is real, I don't know. But Phil Spencer certainly walks the walk now and talks the talk of, you know, we just enable them and get out of their way. And I think Sony has mastered the middle path of that, whereas they're not going to sit around and micromanage Corey and Sony Santa Monica and Neil Druckmann and the guys at Sucker Punch. Of course, they know better than that. But at the same time, their producers are creative and effective enough to be able to know bullshit when they hear it and know when they sit down to play something. Like, let me give you a great example. I mean, unless you could have a really compelling reason for it, if you could have shown a Sony producer the first hour of Hellblade 2, which is literally, if you've not played it, and I use the word play.
Jez has only played it for like 30 minutes. I played the game 3 times.
Okay,
well, I don't blame you, because I use the word play in the most
Jez doesn't like walking sims.
I love walking sims.
I like walking sims.
But there's a difference between well, and that's fine, it doesn't have to be a game, but there's a difference between a walking sim like Gone Home or a walking sim like there was one they put out on Game Pass recently. I forget the name of it now, but it's one of my favorite games of the year. It just dropped on Game Pass. I'm like, what the fuck is this about this woman that goes to a planet and there's an AI on the planet, and the AI has been splintered into like 6 different personalities, and she has to somehow communicate with the personalities in different ways in order to survive.
What's the name of this game?
It came out like 4 months ago, day one drop on Game Pass. I don't remember the name of it, but it's great. And it's a walking sim.
Maybe someone
you can finish it. It's like 2 or 3 hours long. It's great. So I get that genre. I love that genre. But my point to Sony and Microsoft is that the first 90 minutes or 60 minutes of that game of Hellblade 2 is literally you pushing the stick forward, and you don't even, I don't know if the run button opens up immediately or I just hadn't discovered it, because they certainly don't.
You can run right away. Yeah.
Okay. But it's a straight path. Very little is happening. It's just internal monologue. And if, you know,
some nice rocks.
Yeah. Beautiful rocks, beautiful rain. But if you're at Sony, I imagine, you know, working with their experienced producers, many of which, and again, I know Phil Spencer's a gamer, so I'm not knocking his ability to understand the medium, but, you know, they would have said, okay, we love what you're doing. We love your vision. We get slow burn video games. We get that, but there's a difference between boring and slow burn. And this is just fucking dull. And especially on Game Pass, where people can peel off and feel no buyer's remorse, you guys have got to get to some of the meat faster. It doesn't mean you've got to make an action game. It doesn't mean you've got to put a car chase in there. But all you're doing is pushing the stick forward. And after about 5 minutes, we get it and we're ready for the next step. That's what Sony does. Because, you know, they're producers and they're directors, and these are people who love games, know games, and they have some kind of system in place where that relationship with the developers, whether it's first party or second party, is the norm. And it just seems with Microsoft, it's more like a, here's your check, go with God. We'll see you when we're done. Hope it's good. And I think that's why they've gotten into trouble. They're either too hands off, or the people that are hands on don't really know how to be hands on in the right way. And that is what Sony does really, really well, which is why I've always been fascinated that Microsoft has not gone in and tried to poach a bunch of these key people whose names are out there, very easy to find, and bring them over to Microsoft, because, you know, they got the money to lure them away.
It did seem weird to me how Redfall took them by surprise. Almost, they were like, "Oh, this isn't a good game." There was stuff about Redfall that was good. I'm not going to shit all over it. I love the world and the ambiance, but it was not a good game. You're right. No, I spoke to people at Microsoft in LA after that, and I was like, "What happened with Redfall?" And people replied to me. They replied to me with confusion. You know?
What do you mean confusion?
I can't even like describe it. Like,
you mean confusion? Like, what do you mean it's great, or confusion like we have no idea what happened?
not like deer in the headlights, kind of like we haven't got an explanation for you, kind of thing.
Yeah, they're like, we saw the same Pete Hines deep dive you did. We thought it was great.
Well, it's because the mock reviews for that game were in the 70s. So Xbox was thinking, all right, well, we hired these mock reviewers that are former journalists, right? That run these sort of things. And they're telling us that this game's going to be, in the 70s, which isn't a great score at all, but it's definitely
for a game that you clearly plan on continuing to support. To start at 70 these days, it's very likely you can get, like Todd Howard yesterday said, we're planning to put out a meaty DLC every single year for Starfall, right? So, or Starfield. So maybe then a 75 would have been okay because they knew in 6 months that 75 would feel like an 84.
Right, but I mean, there's like, okay, the Bethesda stuff was sort of new. The integration wasn't fully done. 75, 75 is a lot different than a 55, which is I think what it ended up right? And as someone who loved Arcane, like I love all the Dishonored games and Prey, I played Redfall. I could only play for 5 hours. Yeah, I turned it off, and I'm like, I don't know about this game, and it does. It's like, okay, well, what went wrong? And I don't have. Well, I do have some of the direct lines of communication that Jez has. Jez just uses it more often than I do. To then hear
but whatever went wrong is irrelevant. The fact is, it went wrong, and Microsoft should have caught it, and they should have done something about it.
Sure, they should have canceled it.
If that ended up being what they decided to do, they should have done that. Yes.
I mean, Bethesda probably should have canceled it because I don't really think there's much there to salvage.
I mean, I think the IP was the IP was very strong. Out of all the Xbox stuff, when I complain about having relatively uninspired IP, the idea of sort of vampires taking over and blocking people into like a Stephen King, Maine, New England town, and the way it's almost like Gilmore Girls environment meets blood and horror.
It was good. It was good conceptually, for sure.
Yeah, I thought that was strong, and it's a real shame that it ended up. And the art delivered in that, but I think it's a real shame. But yeah, regardless of why it failed, and I've said this before back in the day. Like I put a video out, and I don't know what caused Phil Spencer to block me. There are two things I suspect. He's unblocked me since, but one of them was a video I put out at the launch of Xbox Series X, which was like I don't know what I called him, but it was probably not nice. Going, how the fuck do you launch a piece of game hardware without a single original game? How are you that shitty at your job? And in that same window was the game The Medium from Bloober Team. And I totally get and I understand that it's not first party, it's not even second party, but it was a timed exclusive. And there were things with that game that could have absolutely made that game a solid 82 Metacritic game that people who love horror would have been like, hey, that's pretty cool. Just simple fucking things. Things like the walk speed, or things like and I talked to some of the developers in that game, some things like the little, in games where they'll have like a little glowing little crystal or something in the HUD and the user interface to say, oh, this is interactive. Just the volume you had to be in before that started flashing, or the size of it. Just very simple post-alpha quality of life improvements to make that game more welcoming. Sony would have had, I've said this before, Sony would have put 2 or 3 producers on a plane and flown them out to fucking Eastern Europe and embedded with them and paid them and said, even though you don't owe us anything, we will pay you, or we want to make this great.
See, and this is the thing about Xbox. I don't think Xbox has a centralized production team like that. I know Sony does.
That's the problem. Yeah,
but I don't think Xbox does. And like they have producers that they put on games and stuff like that, but not like a team that sort of works across multiple properties like that. I mean,
yeah.
It's
and then when you hear them talk about, again, you would know more than I about the actual how they run. I know what they say, and how much that's true is relevant unless it's in a earnings call. But what they say is they're very much like, we're not, they seem to like the message, which I get why they would like it. It plays well, but it doesn't result in good games all the time. Of we're not gonna micromanage. We're not gonna send our people out and say, this is how you do it. It's like, we're gonna let these guys run free and these girls run free. It's like, that's just lip service from Sony. Do they do that? Yeah. There is a lot of that at Sony, but it's not like, you know, I'm trying to think of those stories where, like, I remember once where Amy Hennig at Naughty Dog, and she was still there working on Uncharted, and she made this statement that anybody who makes games and makes games within Sony rolled their eyes, where it's like, we don't have producers. It's like, yeah, you do. It's like you may not have them, you know, as
A job
it can
title.
be defined, right? Or you may not have them in the sense that officially this person reports to this person and this person can tell this person what to do. But fundamentally, the way it plays to the audience is, you know, these guys just show up and it's magic and they just sort of do whatever they want. And it almost seems like most people who have made games knew that that was PR, but it's like Microsoft actually heard it and went, oh, that's how you do it? It's like, no, you can't do that. But I mean, again, I'm not saying Sony is micromanaged. They're not, at least my experience with them back then and the people I talk to now. But they're masters at that balance between, you know, letting the creatives run wild, but they're running wild within a very responsible pin that is manageable. That's you know, it's a secret sauce, but it's not that fucking secret.
I feel that.
I don't know. So it's like you mentioned Hellblade 2, and it's like, you know, you mentioned also how it's Microsoft did have the reputation of being hands off, and I've always sort of wondered if they had the reputation during the 360 gen of being too hands on, right? And
Well,
I sort of wonder
I know the Xbox One. I don't know when that started. Maybe it was living in the 360 as well.
the 360, like Xbox One, it was like they're too hands on, they're too meddling.
Yeah.
And then they bought, you know, Ninja Theory, they bought some of these other studios, and I sort of wonder if they were like, all right, we're going to prove to everybody that we're not going to be hands-on, we're not going to meddle, hands off, and we're going to let you create. You know, as far as like Hellblade 2, I don't know what people expected from Hellblade 2, honestly, because
Fun.
I don't even
Did
think
you play
fun-
Hellblade 1? Like, Hellblade 1 and Hellblade 2 are very much super similar games.
I know. And
Well, then great. Then I'm sure Microsoft's happy with what they got then. I mean, I don't know what their internal response is, but I can tell you that I thought there were some really cool things about it, and I moved on after a couple hours because it was too fucking dull. But that's me. I mean, it doesn't mean it's a bad
Did you play
game.
the first one?
No, never played it.
Okay. The first one and the second one are super similar. The first one is a little bit more gamey in the sense, like the combat, you do fight up to maybe 3 enemies at once, but it's usually 1 or just 2, and there is like a kick. Other than that, the game is virtually the same. It's about
I feel
it's
like
about
that's
like
a problem,
her
man.
internal. Well, maybe it could be, but maybe it's like, if you want to say, all right, we're going to let developers make the games that they want, because that's what people always say. Hellblade 2, is that the game that Ninja Theory wanted to make? And it probably is, and I don't know how much interference that Microsoft would have given, but then I've also said that what Microsoft was looking for in 2018 is completely different than what Microsoft is now looking for in 2024. Right? Like, so like we know why they bought those studios. It was for Game Pass. They needed content because they didn't have a first party studio structure, right? They had 5 studios, and all the games that they basically signed in the Xbox One with third parties, from Insomniac to Crytek to the people that were doing Crackdown, it all blew up in their face, right? It blew up in their face. Oh, let's do Sunset Overdrive with Insomniac. And then for whatever reason, either Xbox didn't want to do the second one, or Insomniac didn't want to do it. Now they're off doing Spider-Man. And okay, Crytek, let's do Rise 2, but Crytek owns the IP, and there's a back and forth about whether or not to do it. And it seemed like all their bets that they had made on third party or second party all blew up in their face. So it's like, okay, well, we need to internalize all this. So they buy some of these studios, and I feel like Hellblade 2 and, South of Midnight and all that stuff that from the studios they purchased would probably work perfectly in the system if Microsoft then just didn't go spend $80 billion on more stuff. Because now you're looking at it and you're Microsoft and you spend all this money and you all have these massive franchises that bring in a ton of money, what does Hellblade 2 mean to Xbox and Microsoft at this point in time? Right? Because then you get into why they shut down Tango.
Yeah, but you have to also ask yourself, one of the reasons, I mean, again, it's not the main reason, but I mean, to go in and buy Bethesda, to go in and buy Activision, clearly, I'm assuming part of it was they were looking at what they were doing so far with Game Pass and going, we need more and we need more commercial stuff. Like, you could easily argue that if you're looking at the war map and going, we need content for Game Pass, that content's got to be commercial and it's got to be, compelling to the core gamer audience that's going to be the tip of the spear for this thing. Why are you going out and getting the We Happy Few developers and I get why you'd get Hellblade developers to make a Devil May Cry kind of game, because they made that as well. But to get Hellblade 2?
Well, I think it's because at the time,
or even Psychonauts, I love Tim Schafer. I love his humor. I love his games.
Basically,
but this stuff is niche, man. It's always been niche.
At the time, Satya didn't know what to do with Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Xbox, if it wasn't for Phil, I don't think Xbox even exists at this point in time. I think it folds last generation, right?
Okay.
So you're looking at a time where the Xbox One underperforms in every metric, right? Phil takes over from Matrick. New CEO doesn't know what to do because he doesn't know anything about gaming. Okay. So they buy Minecraft. Minecraft does extremely well for them. He's like, okay, we're going to move you out from underneath Windows because Terry Myerson was the boss. And Terry Myerson was bleeding budgets and he had a really iron grip. So it's like, all right, Phil, we're going to put you in the executive leadership position. We got Game Pass. We got cloud gaming coming, which is something that Satya is super interested in, subscriptions and cloud. Phil's like, oh, well, let me buy some of these studios. We have some money that we can do. So you buy these studios that are available that are cheap.
But why would you? Why
would you buy Compulsion? I mean, I've literally, it's funny.
Why would you not go? Here's what you should have done then. If that, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know. You have a lot more insight into this than I do. But if that was the case, what would you do? Would you look at Compulsion that had not made a hit before, or would you go, you know what? That same amount of money, probably less. Let me back up at Brink's truck to, Shannon Studstill, who was the head of Sony Santa Monica at the time. Let me get this programmer as the CTO from this game. Let me get this small art team over here that wants to, go to your HR people, go, and build some fucking teams. But the idea that you're going to buy some teams that have made things that, it's not like Double Fine's game before Psychonauts 2 was some kind of massive hit.
It wasn't. It was like it was Broken Age, right?
Right.
Or one of those games.
And again, that's not a knock. I love those games, but I'm just saying that they were
everything's hindsight's 2020, and I think
hindsight is not 2020. That is why it is 2020, but that's why you need good leaders, because good experienced leaders have already been down this road. Xbox still to this day, although they are getting better to their credit, reminds me of, again, I was there when Sony went from making games from Super Nintendo and Genesis to first-party PlayStation. And the number of games that were canceled, that were greenlit and had millions spent on them that people have never even heard of, were all of these producers at Sony and directors and whatnot learning how to do this. And you look at Xbox today, and it seems like a lot of them are still learning. It's like, yeah, if you've never made a game company before, hindsight would be 2020. Which is why I'm like, why is Matt Booty, who doesn't really, he was at Midway, but he wasn't at Midway when Midway was doing well. Where are the people that are running that division or that are reporting to Phil that are like, oh yeah, this guy ran, all of Europe and Ubisoft's product development. Oh, this lady ran the most successful first-party Sony studio, and we hired her to build a team. It's like, it's almost like these were the guys we had that were working at Microsoft at the time, and so I guess we're going to use you guys. Here's a blank checkbook. I mean, right. I don't for you. I don't give them the freedom of being able to excuse it by going, well, now we know. It's like, yeah, but You shouldn't have been sitting in the goddamn, Star Trek commander's chair if you've never flown a fucking ship before.
Right, and we'll talk about the booty thing, but when I look at like, and I know people in chat want to, but the way
we asked people in chat like for questions, and they're all a lot of people said ask him about Matt Booty.
So I think it was like, okay, here's some money that you can use to go build up your studio. And at 2018, Ninja Theory is still pretty hot. I mean, you have, they did Hellblade and stuff, and you're right, Compulsion Games, I still question that. I've directly said to Phil, I don't know why you bought them.
And what he said,
maybe it's because he didn't say anything to me. He just said either way.
Did he just ignore your question?
No, he didn't ignore my question, but I'm not going to say what he said, but I'm just saying I've asked that because
thanks for bringing it up.
Well, I'm just saying I had the same thought as you, right?
Yeah.
Because I played Contrast and I played We Happy Few, and I both thought those games were bad games. So to me, I'm like, why did you purchase them? Like, now, I get all the other ones because, they've all had modicum of successes, and I understand maybe your budget isn't that big. And it's like, well, do we buy one big thing or a bunch of small ones? And so you buy a bunch of the smaller independent developers. But I think what ended up happening is I think the pandemic happened and suddenly everything's booming, right? You go, Game Pass is blowing up because everybody's staying home. Consoles are flying off the shelves. You buy Bethesda. Stuff is still blowing up, right? And you think about when they decided to buy ABK, because you mentioned like, why would you do this? But at the time they decided to buy ABK, which they were talking about it, it's just fall of November of 2021. If you go roll back and think about what was going on at that time, Xbox was outselling PlayStation. The Series X's and S's were flying off the shelves.
Yeah, but wasn't that because they couldn't? Yeah, but wasn't that because PlayStation was struggling to actually make the hardware to sell?
And it's not so much they were outselling PlayStation; it was that Xboxes were flying off the shelves. They couldn't keep them in stock, right? And
but are you attributing that to the fact that it was the best box to buy, or are you attributing that to the fact that if people in the pandemic where they needed something would have liked to have bought a PS5, but they couldn't find one?
I don't know what the reason is. I'm just saying that's if you look at it from Microsoft's perspective, right? You're selling all this hardware. Game Pass is blowing up because they have a lot of games on there. What's the next step you take for the division? You have Bethesda, you have all these other things. The games are coming. And suddenly Activision falls in your lap because of all the lawsuits that happened with Bobby Kotick and stuff, and now they're actually in that sphere of attainability of their stock price.
I don't understand your point, though. I mean, I think all those acquisitions were good. I was very happy with those acquisitions.
Well, I think you said something earlier, about this, which I was trying to explain, like where Microsoft's thinking was about all these things and why it led up to the way it is, and then now why Microsoft in 2024 might look differently on some of their acquisitions they made.
No, I'm sorry. I just don't buy it. I buy the fact
fair
that
enough.
Well, because because what you're not shat the bed, and we're used to Bethesda not shitting the bed. I would go, yeah, of course. I didn't see that coming. That Redfall would be bad, and Deathloop really wouldn't set the world on fire either. But if you're talking about 2018, whatever the landscape was, and they said, who we should buy? Compulsion Games and the guys who made Ninja Theory Hellblade. That was a bad decision then. It's a bad decision now. A smart experience group, and I'm not saying Phil Spencer's not smart. I think he's a wonderful visionary. And as much as I think Matt Booty probably doesn't need to be in his position, I wouldn't want to see him fired, but I don't think he needs to be in that role unless these games do turn out amazing that we saw a few weeks ago. I think Phil has been great for Xbox, and I hope that he can turn some kind of the ship around. But an experienced and smart leader, which he is not an experienced leader when it comes to product development, clearly would have gone, okay, you know what Compulsion's really good at? IP creation. We Happy Few is fucking cool as a concept. South of Midnight, I don't know if the game's going to be good, bad, or shit, but it's a really cool, neat idea for a game world. But they're not historically great at creating good gameplay.
Well,
You know what? You know what Ninja Theory's good at? They've made some really, at least one great action game in DMC or whatever, the one, I think it was DMC.
Yeah,
they
DMC
did.
reboot's great.
I know if you're watching
And
the fucking thing.
Dynasty
it's
of the
like-
West is
Right,
also a great game.
Right. I know if people are watching, like, fuck you, that wasn't as good. You know, whatever. I'm not going to get into Dante.
DMC reboot was better than Devil May Cry 4. I'll die on
Fine.
that
Well,
hill.
okay, but regardless of that, I just know that they're already out there salivating to kill me because, you know, but that's not my point. The point is they can put together a good, solid action game that's more than good enough to compete with a AAA, you know, requirement. They should have said, okay, you know what? We're going to get Compulsion. They're going to do the IP creation for us, and we're going to get some of these people over at Ninja Theory, and they're going to do the gameplay, and maybe we'll make a brand new studio, but we'll, you know, do a talent acquisition. But instead that's what an experienced video game leader would have done. They, you know,
I
so
have to say,
2018 or 2028 is irrelevant. You can still look at the outcome of those teams when you bought them and go, why are we buying them? Because we know what they're making and this is not going to work.
I think you're right. I think, but I spoke to some people at Microsoft in LA. I'm not going to say who exactly, but the topic of Compulsion was brought up, and the sort of the gist of what they were saying was, we think we can build them up, and you know, make
based on what?
I mean, the idea was they were like literally what you were saying is that they came up with cool concepts, and now we can attach, you know, we can fix the other parts. You know, like We Happy Few didn't have good gameplay, but it had a good concept and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also,
but again, did the people who were saying this have the experience doing that? Clearly, that was the hope with the initiative as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, yeah, I don't know if they do, and that's but like I think the intent is there, and also like one of the things that I do
gives
know.
a shit about the intent?
Yeah, well, you got to have intent. Intent
why
precedes
people love
action.
Jeffy, because he'll just say what's you know.
Intent precedes action, man. Intent precedes action, and
okay, it does, but come on though. Intent precedes action, but my intent is to no longer trust these people. I mean, I am a guy. Like I said, what did I say in this show? Xbox X is my favorite console of this generation. I think Phil Spencer is probably one of the, you know, now that Iwata is gone, he is, I do believe he is a really great asset for Microsoft. I think he could be a visionary for them. I like that he is sitting in that chair. I am not an anti-Xbox guy at all, but I love games more than I love loyalty to a party. Let's put it that way. And in that, I'm sorry, but you know, when you're playing at this level, you know, you're playing in the fucking NFL and you're one of the most, you know, financially lucrative teams in the NFL, or at least supporting teams in the NFL. And you're like, well, we wanted to win the game, but we didn't know we needed to worry about special teams training, because I mean, how often do you really have to do a free kick or whatever, or 3-point, you know, I don't know football that well. I know it a little good, but I'm just saying, it's like the excuses of pleading ignorance, like, well, our intention was good. It's like, that's cool if you're a bunch of kids out of USC, you know, game making program, and your first startup fails because you had pie in the sky, but you didn't have any experience. These guys are running fucking Xbox. If you only have intention, you shouldn't be driving the boat.
Well, I think they are working towards what you're saying. I think it's just taking a lot longer than everyone would like to have seen. I think like they are doing like this sort of they're making this effort to do integration, and we've seen some of the fruits of this with like State of Decay 3, for example. Is a huge step up from State of Decay 2 as a result of working with the coalition.
Know?
I mean, just visually,
just
visually, you know, and that was all in-engine gameplay. What we saw. Yeah,
great. It looked fine. I mean, again, I'm excited for it. I don't know if my buddy who worked on God of War is still over there. I don't think he is, but he was a big guy on Undead Labs for a while, and at least the second one. I'm not knocking the game. I'm glad it's coming out, but how fucking long has that fucking thing been in development?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Let me ask you this: do you know, you guys have,
and I do think
you guys have a pretty popular. Oh, come on, man. Yes, but everybody's been fighting that war. It's not like the pandemic only affected Microsoft.
No, of course not. Of course not. But I think Microsoft.
Let me ask you this: you guys have a show
sluggishness is probably
that is a very popular Xbox show, correct, amongst the Xbox crowd?
Yeah, I would say so.
So
Yeah.
the Phil Spencers of the world may listen to this show from time to time.
Phil, what did Phil say to you?
Phil says the
Our
show's too
show's
long.
too long?
It's too long. But he might listen to this show because this show
All right, well,
won't
Phil,
this won't be 5 hours long. So if you
Phil, if you're listening, or anybody who knows Phil, just tell him to I don't know, smoke a joint, do something that relaxes him, and deal with the booty situation. Now again,
No, what's up with the booty situation?
what is the
I guess
booty
you can touch
situation?
on.
the booty situation.
The
Now
booty.
again, let's be very, very clear. I
Mhm.
am absolutely open to the idea because I've seen this at companies, and I'm just kind of playing at this point because I mean I loved the showcase, but to be fair though, I've seen situations at companies where there are people who just cannot fire people, and again, I don't want to see Matt Booty fired. I've never met him, but he really, every time I've seen him on at least the interviews, he seems like a genuinely good, smart guy. I've never heard anybody in the industry say anything bad about him as a human. I'm not saying fire that guy, but is he really the guy to be sitting in that chair for Phil's vision? Certainly if you look at the past output. Now, have there been things at Microsoft that I'm not privy to, you guys may or may not be, where it's like, dude, you don't understand. There were these three people that were embedded in the corporate political structure, and every time Matt wanted to do the right thing, he got slammed, and that has been worked out now. Phil finally was able to deal with that and move those people around, and one person left. And now what we're about to see is sort of booty power. And I know it sounds funny because his name's Booty. Sorry, deal with it. That's your name. But that said, though, those scenarios exist in business or in anything, but certainly in business. I've seen them where, if all you're judging is the output of an individual, oftentimes it's Occam's razor, and it's like, well, it makes sense because they're not good at that job. But there are times, where it's like, you can't blame that guy, man. He had all this shit that you don't know about. So maybe Phil's like, look, Jaffe, go fuck yourself. You don't know what we're dealing with. I've cleared that all out. And now Matt has a straight shot, and you saw the vision the other day. And if you like that, buckle up, bitch, because he is going to be able to work with these teams to deliver that. Awesome. And is that a possibility? Have I seen that? Yes. But the reality is, all I, as a customer and as a fan, have to go on is what they've done so far. And what they've done so far is they've put a guy who hasn't really had a lot of big successful product development experience in charge of the biggest fucking group of video game publishers and creators on the planet other than Tencent. And so far their batting average is pretty shit.
No, I'm not the biggest booty defender as well known. I will say,
change the name, Matthew. It's never going to not be funny. Right,
I will say, I don't know why he got the job, but it's probably because he was in charge of Minecraft under Phil. He took Minecraft from what it was when they got it from Notch,
cool,
and made it bigger, better, made more billions of dollars, right? Okay. I don't know why. Like I said, I have no reason. Like, I don't know the reason why. Like, he got it over everybody else, or why they didn't go externally. In my headcanon, I think it's because he took Minecraft and he shepherded it along to eventually what it became. And then when Phil
could have been that, but how long ago was that? And how long do you have to wait to go, oh, this was a bad hire?
Well, I mean, okay, fair. You're right. And it's like, I think Matt took over in 2019. Right, so like for me, it's the proof is going to be in the pudding.
We've been eating the pudding, bitch.
I don't think so. Here's the thing. I don't think so. I think the games that all started under Matt are all about to come, and that will be the determining factor for me, because it's like all the games, the Ninja Theory, the Hellblade 2, the Avoweds, the Perfect Darks, all that stuff. Basically, were greenlit under him, has grown under him, and is going to release under him. All that sort of stuff.
I hope you were right, because
I also
cross my
think,
fingers.
I also think there's a little bit of unfairness here, because when you when you look at the batting average in terms of Metacritic scores, and
Metacritic scores are irrelevant.
No, they're not. They are a great indicator of
what?
of sales of Game Pass engagement. And I know this from speaking to people that the industry, the reason why the whole industry is still obsessed with Metacritic is because it is a great metric for measuring success of a game. And like when you look at games that maybe don't fall into the games we might be particularly excited about, like Flight Simulator and stuff like that, they have made a lot of money. So I think like when we talk about Matt Booty and we're talking about Redfalls and stuff like that, there is an aspect of, okay, we're ignoring the Age of Empires 2's resurgence, which Age of Empires 2 is doing incredibly well, and that's under Matt Booty.
Oh.
We're also talking about Flight Simulator, which has also done incredibly well, and also the Forzas of the universe. Millions and millions, tens of millions of players in Forza Horizon.
Okay, so if what you're saying, though, is that is a representation of what current Xbox is and where they're going with those kinds of games, cool. But then let me just say personally, they've let me down. I don't think those are compelling to when you were earlier talking about people who came up with the 360 generation being the best generation is what Rand was saying, I think.
I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, I ain't a Forza guy. I ain't a Flight Simulator guy. But in terms of like why Matt Booty has his job, there's plenty of evidence to suggest that he's made Microsoft a shitload of money, even if it's not necessarily games that we are personally interested in. Just to play
again, and that's all we're talking about. That it's not even a devil's advocate. Like I remember Scott Rhodey at Sony told me, because I was talking, I would never talk shit because I love baseball. I know it's a great game, but I was always surprised by how much leeway that the MLB team got. And he says MLB is like the redheaded stepchild or the mystery superpower of first party, because that game makes so much fucking money and it's so dependable, and but until you actually look at the stats, you're like, oh shit, really? It's like, yeah, that fucking thing is in the top 10 almost every single year, even when it wasn't on all the consoles. And so I get it. And if you're basically saying we're only looking at a money thing, oh cool, then that's fine. If you're saying Microsoft feels that they can make Game Pass work and they can make Phil's vision work with the Forza, not Horizons, but the Forza Motorsports of the world and the flight sims of the world and whatever else he's worked on, then yeah, go with God. It's working. It's just not for me. But I'm under the impression, and maybe it's an impression created by the media that is not accurate, that Microsoft is really not, when it comes to their first party output, creating a lot of stuff that is becoming beloved. I mean, Sea of Thieves, sure, but again, maybe that's just my ignorance to it. I'll plead that. I'll be open to that. So sure, then continue doing what you're doing, Matt. Full speed ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it is weird, right? Because it is on the back of things like Age of Empires, which I am very interested in. And I am very interested in.
Me too. Age of Mythology. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm not interested in these games. Like I would prefer if Hellblade, for example, was more like God of War.
I wouldn't, as a Hellblade fan.
Yeah, you wouldn't. But you don't have the best taste in games.
Because we have enough God of War. We have enough 40-hour bloated experiences.
Yeah, but what I'm
Hellblade
saying is
I understand to be a linear cinematic.
What I'm saying is, I understand the perception that Xbox can't deliver, because it's oftentimes within these games that are a little bit more complicated and do require a little bit more production values. Like a flight simulator, you don't have to make characters to make a flight simulator work. You don't need like a writing team or voice actors, or you don't need like a high concept philosophies to make a game like Flight Simulator work. And that's where like Microsoft seems to struggle, like you can. I hear you, and I know what you're talking about. I will say I appreciate what I love about Microsoft is the variety. I love the fact that everything is not an over-the-shoulder cinematic action adventure game. A lot of people shit on Avowed because they're like, oh, it doesn't look very good. I'm like, dude, out of all the games that were shown, and I've watched the trailers and I've watched both the deep dives that they did, although the last deep dive wasn't a deep dive, but the one they did last year was really, really good. And I'm like, that maybe it doesn't look as sexy as, South of Midnight or whatever. But mechanically speaking, the amount of choice and freedom that it sounds like at least they're trying to give us, and it may not work, but I'm absolutely with you. I think Microsoft
there are more interesting games on Microsoft's in their ecosystem in terms of just at a level of like variety and mechanically. So I'm with you on that, but I'm just saying that Microsoft Flight Sim, Age of Empires, all that stuff. I mean, when they talk about Game Pass, it doesn't sound like that's what they're looking towards, those kinds of games to make Game Pass into the dominant thing they want it to be. But maybe it is.
I think my point was really, I want to continue to give Matt Booty the benefit of the doubt, you know, because he has delivered money, you know, and I think that's why he's got the job he has. And I think like,
well, why not you just put him in charge of making, you know, certain kinds of games then? I mean, I don't fucking know. I mean, Microsoft Flight Sim.
I just think like some of these more complicated high concept games, which do require a little bit more production values, I do genuinely believe that they were damaged heavily by the pandemic, because a lot of these studios were integrating into Microsoft during the pandemic.
That's his fault. That's because a lot of companies had those problems. But
but I think this is where I think why I give Matt the benefit of the doubt is because I do know Microsoft being this huge sort of sluggish corporate giant that has to, you know, you have to fill in 20 forms to invoice a pencil, for example.
Okay, well, I mean, again, I get it, but that's not my problem.
I know it's not your problem, but I'm just saying this is why I continue to give him the benefit of the doubt because of that.
But I'm not saying that to be dismissive. Like that's not my problem. Like I'm being a dick. I'm saying it more like as a I'm trying to impress upon you.
I know the customer doesn't care. I know the customer doesn't care, and they shouldn't care.
Right, and they're competing against other companies. Yeah. Right, and they're competing against other companies that have figured that problem out.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So, you know, Sony. People used to say Sony stands for soon, only not yet, because it was so bloated. And it was so slow to get things done that there were things that they missed all the time because it just took forever. Sony missed the opportunity to have the exclusive rights to the fucking Power Rangers back when it was about to explode. I brought it to them. I had a friend over at Saban, and people were interested enough, but by the time all the legal people got together who could make decisions, it had gone on to Bandai Namco or whoever got the right. You know, there was a time when it was getting in their way of doing business, and I think Microsoft, slow, but
I think Microsoft has that in droves, that issue.
Right, we'll fix it.
Yeah, I think maybe they have now, and I think Phil getting on the senior leadership team was part, and I mean like the, you know, becoming CEO and going all the way up to the chain above Terry Myerson, all that kind of stuff. But we'll see. I mean, if we're kind of at last chance saloon now. Like
and you got to give Phil credit because he did turn down Drawn to Death. Microsoft was my number one choice, and they you know, I had met with their guys, with Mike Ybarra and all of his team, and it went great. And then I just fucked the pitch so badly. But regard with the official pitch, and they said, well, we'll give you $2 million. If you can make it for $2 million, we'll do it. And I was just like, no, I can't do that. And so Sony ended up eating the shit sandwich that was Drawn to Death. But still, I mean, I got nothing but love for what they're trying to do. But, you know, forgive me for being a skeptic, but
you want
as
them
much
to
as
deliver.
I love them,
you want them to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, because you know why? Because the vision that Phil is sharing is not just great. Like, I don't do console wars, but I do the medium. I love games. And I think like all you have to do, I was talking to Colin about this yesterday, all you have to do is listen to the Call of Duty guys on Black Ops 6 talk about, they did an interview a few days ago about, we didn't know when we were going to be on Game Pass, but we knew that it was a possibility. And we knew that in that, and now that we are, onboarding and the fact that we are going to have just a drove of people who haven't played in a long time or have heard of it, but they're new. And because the business model is shifted and we are on Game Pass for so many people, our design has to change. And we have to make sure that we make things evident and we onboard quicker and we tune the game in such a way that we're not going to turn you off immediately if you haven't played Call of Duty for the last 3 years. That kind of stuff, if subscription-based gaming really takes off, which I hope it will, everything from just the vulgarity of developers thinking it's okay to bloat their games because that you're a captive audience. that will change because it's like, fuck you, I'm moving on to something else. Hellblade 2 was great, but you shat the bed in the first 60 minutes because you took too long to get to the meat. Fuck you, I'm moving on. Everything from that to being able to take chances on weirder games, like a Hi-Fi Rush, I think it is a wonderful thing for the medium. And I get very frustrated because it's like, you've got the most money in the world, you've got all the opportunity, and you guys keep missing it. Now, hopefully you're right, but that's why I get frustrated.
No, I think that's completely fair. I think it's fair.
I think the next 3 years are basically going to tell us all we need to know about Microsoft's how good these games are and how people are going to react to them. Because I'm definitely I'm not fully aligned with Jaffe in the Matt Booty thing, but I have my questions as well. Because
it is in the next 3 years, though. You will know.
Well, no, I mean, you look at like
you will know by April, right? Because Call of Duty comes out, and it's going to be a weird outlier. You know, you're going to see subscriptions go through the roof, right? Unless something just goes wrong. But then the question is, can they follow that up and precede it so people don't churn? The biggest nightmare for Microsoft is going to be February, March, if people have gotten their fix of Call of Duty and there's nothing else coming on to keep people sticking around, because their whole business is about keeping people from churning out of the subscription model, just like Netflix or whatever. And that is where, and if suddenly, if Indie and Avowed don't deliver big, and then Call of Duty delivers, but they don't follow it up with something that keep people subscribing, I don't think you need 3 years. I think.
Well, I was more talking about the quality of the games they're releasing, not the subscription.
Well, I am too, because if those games, well, yeah, but I am too, because if a game, what is coming? Call of Duty's coming out what,
October 25th.
Okay, so and then we know Indie, and let's assume
Indie
Christmas
is
they've got
rumored to be December. Avowed is rumored to be November 12th.
Okay, so what is their first big release that's coming in January forward?
We don't know anything in 2025. All we know for sure.
What do we think might come in 2025?
Well, right now we have South of Midnight in 2025. We have Doom Dark Ages, and we have Fable. Maybe Towerborn is going to get delayed.
Well, that's not going to matter.
No, you're asking me what could be 2025.
No, I know, but I'm just reacting in real time. But okay, so let me ask you this then. So if Indie, do you think Indie's going to be good to great?
I think Indie's going to be really good.
Okay, I do too. Okay.
Machine Games is a great developer.
So why would you not take Avowed and say, you know what, you guys are going in February?
I literally said that. I literally said February on the podcast.
We had this discussion yesterday on the podcast because the rumored release date for Avowed is November 12th.
Right.
But Assassin's Creed Shadows is coming out November 15th.
Right.
And I said, if you're Avowed and you're Xbox and you're Microsoft, what do you do with Avowed? Do you release it 3 days before potentially the second biggest game of the fall?
But it's not
Call of Duty?
That's a problem. But it's not only the fact that it may not compete in that window, it's that they've got to have something to keep people from churning after Indie and Call of Duty.
Yeah, and so it's less about the sales of Avowed and more about the churn for Game Pass. That's what we didn't talk about on the show. And Javi's completely right. There's like a whole different there's potentially a whole different subsection of the audience there who, because like I know from speaking to people at Xbox that churn is a huge area of concern for them, and like they even looked at churn figures for Hellblade. How did Hellblade affect?
I mean,
churn?
they literally went the first 6 months of the year with one first party game. How much churn was there? We don't have the internal figures, so I don't really know. I mean, the only game they released is Hellblade 2.
But maybe you can use Avowed
with Call of Duty. With Call of Duty, and with Indiana Jones, though, if you're not gonna gain subs off those games, you ain't gaining subs. All right, so let's assume that there's no reason to assume both those games are not going to deliver subscriptions. So at that point, you've got to be like a junkyard dog, I imagine, fiercely protecting those folks and saying, we want more subs coming in than we have going out. You need another banger a couple months later, and it doesn't have to be first party, but it's got to be something that gets people sticking around that's either only on Xbox or day one on Xbox Game Pass that everyone else is paying $70 for. And maybe they've got that. I'm not saying these guys are idiots, but sometimes they are. The fact that you're saying they haven't moved Avowed out of November and we don't know what's coming.
Well, we don't know when
February.
it's coming. I'm saying there was a leak that it was November 12th from Obsidian's own blog, but
okay.
we still haven't gotten a date yet.
Not official.
But it is 2024, though. You're saying, as far as you know.
I mean,
I think
Obsidian said they're
yeah.
very, very, they're going to hit 2024. So Indiana Jones, I'm less sure about. I think Indiana Jones might slip to early next year. But,
that's great too. Something needs to be front loaded for the beginning of next year. That's
and
big.
I agree. And Xbox, they've consistently said we want to release a big game a quarter, and they didn't deliver that this year. They did last year, but we can always, talk about the quality of the games. But what you just mentioned about like the sub stuff, Michael Pachter in a recent video had talked about this, and he said like you're probably not going to get that many subs off of this Call of Duty coming in, but it's about like 3 years from now.
Why would you not get that many subs off this Call of Duty?
He basically said he said you would get you'll get a good portion of subs, but then also Xbox has 35 million already. So how many people that would be willing to sub for Call of Duty are already subbed to the service, right? And
I think it's a question of, do you guys know anything about their advertising plans? Because I think they have done so far a really poor job, in my opinion, of selling just the brilliant vision of this thing, which is, I just think back to when I was a kid buying games. We didn't have tons of money growing up. If my parents could have walked into the goddamn toy store or wherever we bought games and it would have been like, oh, your kid wants these 4 games for the holidays? Sure, that'll either be $320 with tax or $15 a month, and you can cancel at any time. Where is that message for mainstream America or mainstream the world?
I mean, wasn't the showcase the beginning
Nobody's
of that message?
The average person's not watching that shit.
Sure, so then it would be when they start the television advertisements.
Have they ever? Don't you think? Again, this is just another knock on Xbox and their leadership. For me, I'm sorry, but you have one of the best products in gaming right now, in my opinion, and you have for a long time. And your average gamer doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about when you say Game Pass.
I had an experience in LA just the other week where I was explaining to Uber driver what Game Pass was because they'd never heard of it. Even though
what did he say when he heard about it? Did he think that's great?
Yeah, he did. And I was just like,
of course. It's brilliant.
I honestly don't think he believed me. I think he thought I was making it up. But I agree, and Microsoft has just their lead marketing guy has left Xbox for Roblox, and from what I heard,
what was the reason?
From what I heard, it's that they prefer to focus on one product, and with Xbox, you can't really focus on one product. So
That's a little goofy. That's a little goofy because Roblox is anything. It's not one product. I mean, it's everything.
Yeah,
but I get it. Okay, fine. That's the lip service. Gotcha.
Well, I don't know if it's lip service. I mean, it's just sort of.
Well, who have they replaced them with?
You're
gonna love this. They've moved all the marketing underneath Booty.
Oh. They have not.
Yes, they have.
Listen, the man has pictures, and by Monday we need to work with the internet to.
What was it, Jez? Didn't all the marketing stuff all move underneath Booty? Because it's now all underneath like each individual games or something.
It's kind of weird. It's like the US marketing has moved on the Booty, but I think international marketing's moved on to another team.
I think that's just what Matt Booty needs because he doesn't have enough on his plate. Yeah. I mean, what the fuck is happening with this company? I'm sorry, you guys. I know you're Xbox centric, and anybody listening, I am not anti-Xbox. And if you were listening to me and you think I'm anti-Xbox, you were educated with a banana in an inner tube because I am telling you over and over in this podcast that I am a fan of what they're doing and I am a fan of their vision. But you guys have got to see this is ridiculous. You're putting the same guy who's running all the product development of the biggest publisher in the world is now also running their marketing?
Well, I don't know. Is he really running it or just overseeing it?
Well, fuck, who
Either
cares?
way, I think it's also
people are answering
sitting around.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. I'm being a loudmouth, but it's so frustrating because I want it to work so bad.
I want it to work too, and maybe it'll be better, maybe it'll be worse. I don't know. But I do agree that Xbox's marketing has often been a point of contention, even amongst hardcore Xbox fans, because you were completely right. Nobody knows what Game Pass is. I have to I'm constantly explaining to friends and family what Game Pass is, the fact that it even exists. And
it's crazy.
I've developed headcanon like Rand, where it's like, oh, the reason they're not marketing it is because they don't want to piss off their partners or something. But it's like then you're just competing with one arm behind your back, And
so here I'm looking at Phil's memo when this all went down yesterday, and basically it says the Bethesda publishing marketing team will move to game content and studios reporting to Matt Booty. The first party games marketing team, including Xbox Game Studios and Mojang, which is led by Aaron Greenberg, will also move to game content and studios reporting to Matt Booty. The Xbox marketing team, led by Chris Lee, will move to Xbox Org, reporting to Sarah Bond. The international marketing team will move to Consumer Sales Org, reporting to Ami Silverman. The Bethesda International marketing team will move to the Consumer Sales Org. So it looks like some of it went to underneath Booty, some of it went to underneath Sarah.
But again, maybe this is one of those things where Matt has been saying this forever, and now Phil and Satya have been able to clear the path for him to do what he's been wanting to do, but he's been stymied for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, that is, like I said earlier in the show, that is a scenario that has played out before that I've seen happen. And maybe that's the case. Maybe he's like, dude, maybe he's banging the same drum we are, which is like, why the fuck would an Uber driver not know what the fuck Game Pass is by this point?
Well, I mean, because it hasn't really been marketed that well outside of...
No, I know, but I'm saying maybe Matt is saying that.
Yes,
maybe...
and I would think he is. And your point about the marketing for Call of Duty and Game Pass, I said this on the show, this is like the come to Jesus moment, as I would say.
What does that mean?
I think come to Jesus moment as in like, this is it. If you ever want Game Pass to be a thing and to blow up into what you hoped it was going to be, because we've seen from their internal leaks that they think Game Pass is, or at least they're projecting Game Pass to be at 100 million members by 2030, which is 6 years from now. You have to get more than just like the hardcore involved in the Game Pass, and you have to go into the mainstream, the casual audience. And you have one of the biggest casual games or core games or whatever you want to call it with Call of Duty. This is your chance to finally inform and let people who normally don't pay attention to the South of Midnights or the Perfect Darks or whatever, but they do pay attention to Call of Duty. Right. This is your first chance to basically show them what Game Pass is and to maybe get them to fall in love or what have you. And that all is going to end up with the advertising. And like, this is that moment. I agree. And I know I know they're talking about having a mobile store, right? Yes.
Because that also is, and I know they're not forgetting it, but I imagine a lot of people who are just Xbox focused. I was hanging out with a friend the other night, and she would never consider herself a gamer, but she plays a lot of, Wordle and Solitaire and kind of, casual soccer mom games and whatnot. And, that if you suddenly, go, oh, Game Pass is, we've partnered with T-Mobile and it's part of your phone bill, or for the first year it's free, and then you get it automatically in your phone for $2 a month. And you have a year to, get people obsessed with their Solitaire, their Minesweepers, their Candy Crushes, their Wordle version or whatever. That's another place that I'm assuming they're planning on a lot of this money coming from. I know they are. I mean, of course, King was a big part of the acquisition. So I haven't heard anything about that really either. Those people should be knowing what Game Pass is as well. Just the people who don't even consider video games, but they're like playing their mobile games all the time. I pay for Apple Arcade and I love it. I'd be more than happy if I started getting Game Pass shit on my phone that was, not like games I can't play on my phone like Halo. I understand that you can, but come on, what a ridiculous concept to play.
That's why there's going to be an Xbox handheld.
Sure, great.
What do you mean? Are you a fan of that idea?
Well, I'm a fan of it in that if it's the same thing as the next Xbox and it's like the Switch, where the Valve thing, what is it, the Steam Deck, where you can plug it in and if you have a monitor, but you can take it on the go. But a dedicated handheld, no, I'm not a fan of.
What's
because
that?
I think because I think, I again, my experience with it coming from Sony has been that unless you really, I mean, God, how many more teams does Matt Booty have to fuck up? Because unless you, because unless you separate the developers like Nintendo did back in the day and say, these are dedicated handheld developers, not just from a technical standpoint, but they know what the mentality of a handheld gamer is in terms of game length and, all kinds of user interface issues, blah, blah, blah. You've got, it's like, oh, Naughty Dog's making a game for the Vita, and then they make one and they move on. It's like the amount of consistent support needed. Sony has historically done terribly with all of their peripherals in terms of support. Maybe you could argue PSVR 1 was an outlier, not that it mattered. But most of their shit was tragically undersupported because the teams would get excited for a couple of years because it was the new sexy tech, and then they'd go back to the bread and butter, which was the home console. So if you're saying, yeah, we're going to have dedicated division to this stuff, that is software development, cool. But if it's like, oh yeah, Todd Howard's going to be working on a game for the handheld, it's like, is that really?
I think for what it's worth,
like
I think it will just be able to plug into a TV.
Then
It'll
I think
just
it's
be
great.
an Xbox.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. But no, I complain more about I love Game Pass on my phone in terms of like, I can sit at the dentist office and there's certain games that do play well on the phone, but I'm not going to carry around a fucking backbone, which I have. And I'm not going to, if you, the idea that I've said this before, here's what Microsoft should do. They should make a fucking phone that's for gamers that has controls just like the P Go clamshell design. So you can slide it open and the controls pop out, slide it back, looks like a normal phone.
That'd be sick.
But don't fucking ask me to play fucking Halo Infinite with touchscreen. Go fuck yourself. It's utter junk. I know it makes money. Kids will do anything to play a game, but it's crap. I'm not doing it.
I don't think even kids want to play Halo with touch, but
they don't. Can you? But that's also the brilliant thing. And maybe, everybody's got their nostalgia or their history that, informs their view. But again, I'm not saying we grew up in, the mountains. We had money, we had water and shit, but we weren't very wealthy. And as a guy who liked wealthy hobbies like games and movie making, I felt it, And to me, the most exciting moment, and it wasn't even Game Pass, but now it would be Game Pass. At the time, it was Stadia, because I have pretty good streaming where I am and I live close to a server farm, was that the best place to play like Cyberpunk the day it came out was playing it on Stadia, because it was the most stable. It was the highest version you could play unless you had the world's best PC at home. The idea now that you can get a Samsung TV if you live in a good area, or a phone, and you can play all the games that the world is playing if you're into hardcore games or whatever. I mean, that's just the future. I mean, that's fucking brilliant. And that is another reason I love Game Pass so much. I've had great experience with their cloud gaming. If I can play a game in a cloud, I will. Like, that's always my first choice, whether it's Game Pass, PC Cloud, or whether it's GeForce, because it's the best experience if your streaming is good. And I know to people who have bad streaming, that sounds insane. They just don't believe it. But the minute you get into a situation where your streaming's good enough, it's magic, man.
I played World of Warcraft on NVIDIA GeForce Now while I was in the hotel room in LA.
Yeah.
And it worked really well.
GeForce, right. GeForce Now is the shit, man. If you have the premium GeForce Now, it's like $20 a month. Money well spent if you live in a good area.
It's crazy good. I mean, I was on hotel Wi-Fi and it was still good.
Yeah.
I wanted you to break a tiebreaker between me and Jez.
It goes in the vagina usually. Sometimes if you're feeling weird. Yeah. Sometimes if you're feeling weird.
We had this discussion about Gears E Day, right?
That's what I'm talking about.
And
oh god,
I think I can't wait.
You upset a lot of people, Rand.
I know I did. But you know what? The truth hurts sometimes. The truth hurts. I said to Jez that I think Coalition never goes back to finish that story, and they never do Gear 6, because why would they?
Okay.
And Jez, it was being like, no, 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 no. They told me they're going to do Gears 6 and they'll go back to Gears 6. And I said to him, if Gears E-Day is more successful than Gears 4 or 5 ever were, why would you ever go back to finish a story off of a less successful series when you could just continue on with more Gears E-Day, which it seems that people are going to want, judging from their reactions.
Okay.
So, you're a former developer, right?
Yeah.
You have the coalition doing this prequel move, especially with how long even games take to make these days, 5 years for AAA. Do you think they go back and finish the Gears 6 story at some point? Or are you like me, where you're more cynical and you're like, I don't think they ever do. I think this is a clean break.
Well, okay, so just so we're clear, because I love the first 2 Gears. I recently had Cliff on the show to really deep dive into Gears 1. I was delighted by how great that game still plays. I played, what was the Gears game that went open world with that snow sailboat?
That was Gears 5.
That was Gears 5.
That was the
last one. That was the very last one in 2019.
So that's and I enjoyed it. I never finished it, but I thought it was fine. It was
really good.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, I didn't like it as much as the first couple Gears, but I don't think it's an open world game, frankly. I don't think that serves the essence of why that game's great. But anyway, to me, it's the same shit that when you hear Naughty Dog go, well, no, Nathan Drake's done. Didn't you play the end of Uncharted 4? He's retired. There may be more Uncharted's, but it'll be with his daughter. It's like, fuck you. That's like saying, well, we killed Godzilla. He's never coming back. What do you mean we can make a sequel? It's like the money drives everything and audience demand drives everything. So they can tell you they want to make Gears 6 story, and they might if they feel they've got a good angle that is just as commercial as continuing the Marcus Phoenix days. But the truth of the matter is Marcus Phoenix and Dom are a big part of why Gears as a franchise works. And why it became what it is. Just like God of War. Yes, Atreus is part of the fiction. He's a part of the canon, but they've done nothing on that team to make people salivate for an Atreus-only game. Now, that doesn't mean that couldn't work, and it doesn't mean that they shouldn't try it at some point, but to walk around and say, now God of War could be a game with Atreus or Kratos, who are you going to pick? Only a fucking moron right now, unless you've seen the design of what it's going to be, would pick Atreus to lead the next game. And so I guess my point is that a lot of times developers will tell you, they'll say things that they believe and that they either want to believe or actually do because their bosses have told them. But end of the day, when you're talking about gambles of $200 million, $150 million, and you've got marketing and sales buy-in and all this other shit buy-in, just because, the story isn't finished, who cares?
You're breaking my heart. You are breaking my heart.
This is why we love Jaffe.
I'm not saying that
Jaffe's ruined. No. You've ruined my life. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's fine. But I mean, I would argue hitching my wagon to write primarily about Xbox has ruined your life. But that said, I'm kidding. Oh. But I'm just fucking with you. But seriously though,
I was minimum
would
wage
say that
before.
If you are indicative of the majority of fans, then I think you're right. I am just telling you as a lay fan of Gears of War, I'm not familiar with the fandom being all in on who is the woman in Gears 5?
Kate.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that she sits there with the pantheon of sort of the great Gears fandom. If she does, then I think you know more about it than I would. Then I would say great. But my lay vision says that she's not up there with Marcus and Dom and sort of those kind of games that everybody has that love for. But if you're saying, no, Jaffe, you don't understand, Gears 5 moved 30 million units and they get demand all the time for Kate's conclusion, then, you may be right. But I wasn't aware of that if that's the case.
Well, it didn't move 30 million units, so you don't got to worry about that.
Okay.
No, Jaffe explained it in a way better way than I did it.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be a great story. I'm not saying they may not eventually do it, but I'm just saying that if I'm making the call, why would I greenlight that when I can...
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. If Gears E-Day is a huge hit, why would you ever go back to Gears 6? There's 14 years in between Emergence Day and Gears 1. There's plenty of stories you could tell in between that to reach to the point where you're at Gears 1. And by the time they do, it could be 2045. We'll all be older, man. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Shut up, Rand. You don't know anything.
I'll throw you a bone here, Jez.
Let me ask you this. What is it you want about Gear 6?
He wants the story to be
I just want it to be finished.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking is it's like,
it ends on a cliffhanger. I will be endlessly annoyed if I don't know what happens.
Well, here's what I do
Even if it's
think.
a bad story.
I do think that these companies that are continually going back to the well owe it to their current audiences and their corporate overlords to be planting seeds to kind of rip off and paraphrase Hamilton, for trees that they will never sit under, in the sense that it's fine to go back to E-Day, but if you're not planting seeds that allow Gears to be able to grow and become fresh to new generations, I think you're just getting into the world of comic books where you're just recycling the same 40, 50-year-old men until we all die out.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
But you can still do that, I think, within the IP, right? So let's say Kate is a compelling character. I didn't get that. I don't have a problem with her at all, but I wasn't like, dude, she's a fucking franchise player. But let's assume she was. Gears exist in a world where you could get a good writer to explain time travel or multi-dimensions or whatever.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Now you're speaking my language.
Okay, but I'm just saying somehow Kate becomes a more franchise player and we integrate her into, maybe she reaches back like Terminator into the past of E-Day. And she's like, you know what I'm saying? But she's badass now. And so now she becomes a real part of that franchise. But Kate right now, I think is not that.
Here, Jez, I'll throw you a bone. I'll throw you a bone, Jez. No, let me just finish.
Okay,
I'll throw you a bone.
Throw me a bone, and then I won't.
So they'll finish the Gears story, Gears 6 story. It'll be an expansion to Gears E-Day. So a year or two after Gears E-Day, they'll throw you a $30 expansion that wraps up all the story of Gears 6 in 5 hours. There you go,
dude. I would take that.
Or do it like what was it? What was the Busters game they did? It was awesome.
Busters, yeah.
That was
really
awesome. Good. Do it like that.
I mean,
yeah,
you could
easily do it like that.
I would take that. Okay, I want to wrap up on one question, the ultimate question for David Jaffe, right?
Yes.
What the fuck does Microsoft do with Halo? We've talked about Gears, right? But really, the big Halo's in a bit of a weird place right now.
And that's on, that's on leadership, and Booty's got a lot of explaining to do on that. And
so imagine you've been given control of Halo, David.
Okay.
What do you do?
I start from scratch. I think the thing is, I was making games in Halo. I think their real heyday was like, I remember going into Blockbuster, and Blockbuster had Mario for their Sony section, or for their Microsoft, God damn it, Jeffy, Nintendo section. I think it was Crash at the time or something for Sony. And then Halo was their big franchise player. And you had that era that was like, I guess it was like 96 to, 2003, where it was like the biggest fucking thing going. And I think the mistake they made, and they continue to make, is to think that the problem with modern Halo is that we just need to make better games. Of course, that's true, but I don't think it resonates at a cultural, again, to use the word zeitgeist level like it did. I don't, because really ask yourself, if you extract yourself from the lore, and that's something I know a lot of hardcore fans have a hard time doing. It's like you need more than the hardcore fans that understand the history of the Spartans and the history of the Warthog. They don't move the needle. They're important, but they're not going to make you the kind of money you need if you go off and try to please them only. So then you have to ask, well, what is it about Halo at a North Star level, at a level of essence that can still resonate today, and start from that? Because I think even though I enjoyed Infinite very much, I thought it was a lot of fun and I love the multiplayer, fundamentally to a new generation who wasn't birthed and raised in that time where Master Chief ruled the roost, it's just some guy, you don't see his face. He's not very interesting as a character on the surface. He's just like, silent guy in a mask. Okay. I mean, imagine being an 11-year-old kid, or imagine however old you were when you first encountered Halo, but you don't have that experience and you just go into a store, you go on the internet, you're like, he's just some guy in armor. Like there's nothing compelling about him if you don't already know the background. So I would say I would spend some time really diving into what is it about Halo that could resonate today, that would allow old fans to still be happy enough, but would really, bring it up to fans today would vibe with. And I don't know what the answer is. I know there are characters out there that do that, but I would have to spend some time thinking about it, because I don't, I mean, that's my take on Halo. I mean, I don't see a lot of people cosplaying as Master Chief at Halloween. I don't see a lot of people anymore. Nobody's really talking about the Halo season 1, season 2.
I think that hurt. If that TV show was like the new Fallout show or the Last of Us TV show, you would probably get more interest. I think the problem with Halo, and even Gears to a certain extent, is that it has its set fan base, and sometimes the developers don't want to go about what the fans want, right? So for Gears, for example, there was a tweet I saw this past week showcasing
about the wall bouncing,
the wall bouncing of the multiplayer, and people were like, if they want Gears to kind of become what it used to be, they need to like remove the wall bouncing from the game, because the a lot of people don't like that. But then the stalwart Gears fans are like, no, that's a skill issue that has to still be in the game. But then people be like, yeah, but it drives new players away. Don't you want new players to enjoy the franchise? So you have that whole, the old guard of what they love Gears versus what the developers want to do to bring in new players, and sometimes they clash, and they might.
It's the same with the skill-based matchmaking with Halo. I know huge Halo fans.
Well, or even like another thing that me and Jez will talk about is you look at Fortnite and you look how it's a cultural icon, right? You got skins from everything on there. Warzone has Snoop Dogg, and it's got also cultural stuff. Overwatch is about to do some Transformers crossover. Like all these biggest games are all do that sort of stuff, but you would never see that in Halo. It doesn't have.
I appreciate that if they can replace it with something worth being that precious about, but they can't.
But it's also that push and pull of being like pleasing the old fans and also trying to gain new ones.
That is the biggest. Yeah, it's a nightmare. My lesson on that came with Twisted Metal 2012, which is when you have enough time, when you generation out your original fans, and then. That's why people are always like, Jaffe, when they should make a SOCOM. I'm like, no, they shouldn't, because they should take the essence of what people loved about SOCOM and call it something else. But you're exactly right. When it comes to those old fans, they are going to fucking rip you apart unless you basically deliver nostalgia porn for them. And in that, what happens is that nostalgia porn might make them happy, but everybody else tunes out, right? And if you go the other direction, the old fans tear you apart on the social media and review bomb you, and it runs your risk of, not making the kind of money you need to make to merit the investment. So I think unless you've just been consistently doing it like a Mario or a Zelda, I think there's a shelf life for this stuff that if you don't refresh it frequently enough, you're better off starting with something new. Because I think Halo's a great, now Gears is a little different for me, and I'll tell you why. I think Gears, even though I am a progressive liberal, I'll fucking, if they were running a dog against Donald Trump, I would vote for the dog, right? I mean, that's how, and I'll own it. I'm down with that. I'm not anti anybody else just because of that. But my point is that Gears, though, is primed to really, in my opinion, with E-Day, and I don't know what the game is yet. We just saw a trailer. Is primed to almost do not the same kind of numbers, but the same magic trick that Top Gun Maverick did, which is split that audience right down the middle because there's so many people out there that are, I don't think they're properly informed, but they think they're informed about all the woke stuff and the sweet baby stuff and the DEI stuff ruining games, right? And I think one of the reasons a lot of people vibed with the Gears trailer last week was that it felt like we hear you, we get it, even though I personally feel I don't give a fuck if Marcus Phoenix comes out as trans Jew Muslim.
Oh my God.
I don't give a fuck. He's a cool character they're a cool, but I get that there are people that do. So my point is, I think they're primed to be able to make a game that doesn't offend the left, but makes the right feel like they're being heard. I was watching with my family. They had not seen Top Gun Maverick. We were watching it last night, and it was like, if you've seen the movie, at the beginning of the movie, Tom Cruise crashes and he ejects out of his plane, and he walks into this diner. And the diner may have been painted by Norman Rockwell in like 1953, because there was not a black person, a Hispanic. Everybody in there looked like they came off a box of a cornflakes ad from the 1950s. Everybody was as white and American, tropey as you could get. And that's not good or bad. I'm just saying that was calculated. And I think with Gears, I think they actually could ride that wave into relevancy for a franchise that hasn't really had a big fan base for, since the third one, probably. I think Halo is a little bit different. My bigger point, though, is I think you need to stay away from franchises if you haven't already been updating them regularly, because all you're going to do is get in trouble with old fans and new fans. Better to start something new.
Right.
Same game, but just change the IP, and then nobody can complain about that's not what Gears is, or that's not what Halo is.
We do have a question from chat for you.
Uh-huh.
From Fletch. He says, Jaffe, what do you think of Xbox's new multi-platform approach? And do you think this will have an impact on hardware and potential Game Pass subs?
Yeah, I mean, if he's talking about like the fact that they're putting their stuff on PlayStation,
on PlayStation or Nintendo, yeah,
right. Well, I have always said the best thing Xbox could do, in my opinion, for Game Pass is to put their games everywhere, but make them also on Game Pass day one. Because the comparison shopping would be staggering at that point if they can market the message. Because it would be like, oh, I want to go see Inside Out 2. Okay, fine, not a problem. You can subscribe to Disney Plus and see it day one, or you can go out and see it in the theater, or you can pay $25 just to buy it at home or whatever if the theater comparison isn't apples to apples. Okay. How long is it going to take most people to go, oh, fuck? Like I said, why am I spending hundreds of dollars a year on games when I could just spend $15 a month and churn out whenever I want when they got something I want? That's fucking awesome. So to me, I think it's actually great if they can also get that message out there that the Uber driver doesn't need to be educated every time Jez gets in the car. Either that, or they should just pay Jez to go ride with a bunch of people in Ubers and just
there you go,
proselytize.
Jez, that could be your new job. Go ride with Ubers and
explain
and tell them about
Pass.
Game Pass, so then they can then tell their riders about Game Pass. There
but
you
so
go.
I think honestly, the more they do that, the better, if that message serves. But I also am a very big believer that we're about 5 to, again, who knows when, but my download speed is 600 megabytes per second, which is Spectrum internet. I pay $20 a month, $30 a month, whatever it is. It is not like corporate line to Starlink or something. It's just good internet. And I live close to a server farm. And the reason I bring this up is because fundamentally we are absolutely moving towards a point where all the hardware goes away anyway. And it's just coming into your TV or to your monitor or to your phone or whatever. And so the long game or the medium game, depending on when you think it's going to hit a critical mass where they can make most of their money from that, is it's irrelevant what system it's on, because it's going to be on everything. It's just going to be coming into your home. But in the meantime, though, I think it's good because it does push Game Pass. And I think that's really where they're going to sink or swim, is if they're going to be able to make that work. I think if they don't make it work, I don't think anybody gives a fuck if Microsoft makes another Xbox. They should keep being the biggest publisher in the world, but who cares?
I mean, I'll care.
Why? What does it matter if your next Halo?
No, I mean,
as
They
long as
own
it
a
gets
lot of
made?
games, man.
No.
I'm not saying the games go away.
Hardware, that's what I'll care.
Why? What does it matter where you play the hardware?
I mean, you asked about, like, to me, like,
Yeah.
I would care.
I know why.
Because the console is just where I like to play my games, whether it's the Xbox console or the PlayStation console.
Okay, but why?
A lot of it has to do with my setup. Like my consoles are over on the other side of this large room where it's all hooked up to my 77-inch OLED TV and stuff, and my PC's on the other side of the room. It's hooked up to a 25-inch 1080p monitor. And I'd rather just sit in my chair in front of my OLED and just play my games than sit here where I do my work in front of this. Like
I'm still confused though. Why don't you just let's say everything comes to PS6 and there is no Xbox Series X2? Why not hook your PS6 that will play Perfect Dark and Gears 7 or whatever?
I mean, I would probably I would. I'm just saying I would. Well, also,
I'm saying, what is your experience that's not nostalgia based or ego based that actually would change if Microsoft stayed in games as the biggest publisher in the world, continued to do what they're doing?
Well, I mean, I also
lose your library. If they've stopped
I
making
have 3,000 games. I have.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay, so
I know this is just me. This is an ego thing.
No. Well, the library is not an ego thing. I get that.
1.3 million gamer score to my profile, and that's. I mean, I know that doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but that means something to me, right?
That's fair. I mean, I would honestly, what I would love to see happen, and again, this is more of a streaming thing. It can't happen immediately. Would be that, if Game Pass or if Microsoft went to Sony and said, look, not that we're a threat to you guys, but we'll get out of the business of hardware, but we want Game Pass on PlayStation. And that means your gamer score and all the backwards compatibility. But the problem with that is that a lot of the games would have to stream because you're not going to get your 360 disc of Lollipop Chainsaw working on natively on a PS5 or PS6 or whatever. But
that's the issue. It's like if that hardware goes away, then eventually your Xbox Series X will stop working, and then you lose access to all your games unless they figure out a way to bring that content to Windows. But that's a
But won't it always work on whatever Game Pass you have? I mean, if my iPod breaks, which I don't even have an iPod anymore, my Apple account is still aware that I bought
what you're gonna run it on?
album.
What you're gonna run it on if there's no hardware?
Whatever.
They're not selling Xboxes anymore, then.
Oh, okay, but if they're not streaming, I'm saying if you're talking about that, okay, I understand.
Well, you have to remember that the servers that run xCloud are literally repurposed Xbox consoles. So presumably, if they get out of hardware, they're getting out of cloud as well.
No, that doesn't make any sense. That's ridiculous. That's
what their hardware,
their hardware
stacks are right now.
I understand, but to say that, whatever they need to run their backwards compatibility stuff, if it can't run on a PC, I'm assuming they would still keep that old hardware going, but it doesn't mean that they have to make new hardware. They would just have all their stuff run natively on PC for their new game.
That's a licensing nightmare though, isn't it? To put old...
Why?
Like, because I've got an Xbox version of Monster Hunter World. Capcom's not going to let me run that on PC.
No, but I'm saying that for the stuff that's running off of current Xbox hardware in the cloud, they would just keep that if they want to keep the legacy people happy, which they should. They're not going to destroy the way those games.
But that's also astronomically expensive. So
why?
Today, cloud is not commercially viable right now. It's incredibly expensive.
Well, we're not talking. Yeah, I understand. We're not. But it's not only not commercially viable right now. It's not technologically viable in the next 5 years. But so that's what I'm saying. So when you say, "Oh, it's about my old library," that's why it matters that they stay in hardware. Okay, I don't think that matters to the big picture because I don't think that's most people, but I do respect that, and it makes total sense why you want them to stay in hardware for the foreseeable future because you've got all of this stuff that's banked. That totally makes sense to me. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I think that's the argument for most people. There is some console war tribalism in there for some people at least, but I think most people are just like, well, if there's no more Xbox hardware, then what do I do with these thousands and thousands of games once my Xbox stops working? But anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean that's totally fair, totally fair. I mean that's gonna be a problem with all of this because it's
Yeah.
what do you do with your cassette tapes? I mean or your
that is true.
CD-ROMs or
That's true.
Jaffe thinks like, hey, the multi-platform approach is good because you're gonna have the comparison shoppings, and people might be like, well, why am I gonna be here? Why would I pay $70 here when I can get it there for cheap? There's also the flip of that, which is what I was concerned about the multi-platform approach was that it drives down adoption for the next piece of Xbox hardware. And, there's a lot of already, like just today, and I know this doesn't really have, it's related, but the Marvel versus Capcom collection isn't coming to Xbox. And I see a lot of angry Xbox fans on Twitter being like, why isn't this coming? And there may be a technical reason, I think Jez put it out there, that has something to do with like the empty framework engine or something. But the concern that I have as someone who enjoys Xbox console hardware is like, okay, well, if the adoption is less because you're putting your games elsewhere, so that people don't see a reason to get your hardware, some developers might choose to not even bother with an Xbox version of a game because there isn't the user base to support that. Plus, if the rumors of that Jez has talked about Microsoft putting Steam on the next Xbox, or at least having a way to access Steam, some developers might be like, well, there's no reason to make an Xbox game because those users have access to Steam on that hardware. Yeah. So to me, I think it's like, oh, well, I could see it going your way, right? Where it's maybe this is all great and beneficial and everything's good, and I'm just a stupid person talking into a microphone.
Or correct, but I never said you were stupid. I just I get your vibe. I just don't think that. Keep going though. I want to address that. I think that's the underlying point though. But keep going.
The underlying point being like, if it goes badly, and I've expressed this to Xbox, executives and stuff, that I don't want to end a situation where like you buy the next piece of hardware and then a couple years in, nobody else buys it, and third parties and all the indies and stuff skip the platform because it's not viable anymore. That would be like my that would be awful in my opinion.
Yeah, but that's that's the game. That's the that's the Sega. That's the 3DO. That's the Ouya of the world. I mean that happens. You roll the dice. But here's what I'll say that I think is more important. I really the underlying issue of all this, which is you're dealing with a $1 trillion company that is giving lip service to people, but fundamentally, they are trying to stay in business and make a lot of money. And I think they know that the future is, it's not in just pleasing a bunch of hardcore Xbox fans or PlayStation fans or whatever. It's the new generation. It's people coming up. Yeah, the nostalgia is important, which is why I think maybe for the first time this Christmas, Sony has a shot to dig into some of that family money that Nintendo usually gets, that they usually fail at, because now we've been around as Sony but they've been around long enough as Sony that a lot of parents are now having kids that are like, hey, Astrobot, hey, whatever that other kids game is they end this Christmas from Sony.
Lego Horizon.
The Lego Horizon, right? So I get legacy, I get the importance of that, but I think fundamentally there's this, I wish gamer fans would be able to, I wish the hardcore vocal people online that are console fans would be able to say, I can distinguish between my own personal wants and needs, and I still understand that I am no longer the North Star that the business is chasing. So like when you say, I don't want to lose my library, that's a very personal thing that I think anybody can appreciate and understand and go, yeah, that makes sense. That would suck. But I also think that it's important for people to understand that that's not really keeping most people at these companies up at night, because the percentage of those people, the percent, but you do, but there's a lot of people out there that will come to the table in this sort of conversational battle of these things and act as if their passion for wanting their library or their passion for Psychonauts or what that those passions are shared by millions and millions of people. But most people just take low barrier of entry and good enough every single fucking time.
Yeah.
And that's how the businesses work, unless you're a boutique business like, you know, a fancy schmancy steakhouse versus a generic, you know, what is it, Outback Steakhouse franchise. And I think that's fine, but I think sometimes it's just people lose sight of that, and their personal stuff they try to graft onto business decisions and analyzing business decisions. And it's like, they're not thinking about you. If Microsoft has said numerous times, I mean, we all know that their play is for Game Pass. They want to be there in 5-10 years. They want to be Netflix. They want to be the Kleenex of tissues or the Xerox of copiers, and it's called Game Pass. And so that's where the puck's going, right? That's what they're thinking. They're not really worried about, oh no, we're in third place of the console war. That's just not in their, why would they be thinking about that? That's 10-year-old thinking for them, right? In terms of, you know, that's what I think. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I still remain very excited. It was a great show. I'm 50-50 on if Matt's the guy to give to
the booty problem, as you said.
I don't know if he can take us to the promised land.
We'll see,
but we'll see. And I'm very much looking forward to play. I mean, like I said, Indie's up there. I don't have a lot of faith in the South of Midnight, but I love the theme. I love the art. Avowed, I remain stupidly excited for, because every time they open their mouths about what it is, I'm like, that's really cool. There's a lot of freedom they're giving players. I like that as a gamer. Perfect Dark, you know, I mean, I think Perfect Dark will be more than good enough. I thought the trailer was great to see something, but we know that Crystal makes good, solid games. I was bummed that they didn't show more cool gadgets, like the real essence of what that game is about. I was expecting to be like, oh, you know, weird time travel gadgets, and I can take this person's DNA and replace it with the DNA of a tiger. I don't fucking know. But I mean, that's the whole shtick of Perfect Dark, is that she's James Bond with like gadgets from the future. And they didn't really show much of that. It just looked like a really nice first person shooter, right? But I thought it was a great show, and I thought it put Sony's state of play to shame. I thought Sony's show was terrible.
I want to get you on this one. Do you think, I've seen a lot of people say, because the Xbox's show was so good, that Sony has to respond with an even better showcase?
No.
Do you think that's, I said the same thing. I don't.
Sony is inoculated this generation. Sony is you know, Sony is basically whatever show they put on after Friends back in the day. It's just autopilot. People will watch it, which is not to say they haven't made great stuff. They have, of course. I'm not knocking their output. But I'm just saying that they're so entrenched at this point that they don't even have to say anything, and their shit still flies off the shelf. And that's because no one's really offered a good counterpunch. I think if Xbox can communicate Game Pass this Christmas, I think then they may have to start. But why open your mouth when you could put your foot in it, when your sales are still through the roof? Like, why even risk it? But as a fan, I would love to see that. Are you kidding? I'm a kid who grew up with the Atari, which every time you bought a game, there was like a 40-page manual of all the games coming soon. I mean, I want to see what they're doing. I hate that I don't know.
Well, those were the days when you would buy a game and it came with like a 30-page manual, and you sit there and read it before you would even play it.
Well, those days were after. The manual days, which are long gone too, were after. This is when you would buy a game, and you would not just get that, but you would literally get a company catalog of all the shit that was coming, and it was like 40 pages. You can go online and just look up Atari 2600 catalog, and it's like, fuck. But these are also games that took, you know, 6 months to make and one person to make it, and, you know, but back then that was the best we had, so that was AAA.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Jaffe, because
it was fun. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No,
you're awesome, man.
The whole point was for you to talk.
Yeah, I know, but I'm a loud mouth.
Give your opinion.
I loved it. I'm glad you guys invited me. Hopefully we can have you on my show if you're interested sometime in the future.
Yeah, definitely.
I would love to talk to you guys. But yeah, it was fun, guys. Thank you so much. And thank you for your Patreon members for the questions and hanging out with me. And if you liked what I had to say, come find me on our show over on YouTube. It's Gavin and Games, or just David Jaffe Games, or find me on Twitter. I'm easy to find. I'm a fucking whore.
Yeah, you're all over the place.
I'm all over. I'll metaphorically spread it for anybody. I'm easy. But I appreciate it, guys. Seriously, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you for being on. Thank you,
All right, you
everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back on Friday with a new, Xbox 2. And next week for Xbox 2+1, we got Paris Lily coming on. Talk about some more of the stuff, the Xbox-related things. So until then, have a great rest of the week.
Rock
Later.
and roll, everybody.